Everyone. I was told it's evening at 5:30 when it's dark out, so maybe it changes in 6 months, but I'll say good evening nonetheless. Thank you for joining us. We will call this meeting to order. And may I have a roll call, please, Madam City Clerk?
Mayor Rachel Arizmendi.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Jean Goss.
Here.
Councilmember Edward Garcia.
Present.
Councilmember Kelly Krebs.
Here.
And Councilmember Robert Parkhurst.
Here.
Madam Mayor, you have a quorum.
Thank you. And just for the record, we did not have our closed session today at 4:30. That was canceled. And I actually have my second page of my agenda missing, so I will look here. If I can ask Councilmember Krebs if she can please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance and inspiration.
Sure, please rise. Ready, begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well, we have a packed agenda, so I will keep this short and sweet. We are entering into the season of gratitude. I think Thankful November, lots of people, practice daily affirmations of gratitude throughout November, so I thought I would just list a few things that I am grateful for. Obviously my family and friends and, the roof over my head and all of the other blessings that I have. But in terms of specific to our city and this role, I'm grateful to be here to help improve and maintain the city and its livability and its standard of living. I am grateful for our Sierra Madre small businesses and the Winterfest on November 27th, which will celebrate those. I am grateful for the financial health of the city and, as we'll talk about later tonight, our ability to decide how to improve services and facilities throughout the city. I'm especially grateful for the volunteerism and the strong sense of civic duty of our city's residents, and I am thankful for all of my fellow council members. I have a lot of breath, sorry.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilmember Krebs. The next item on our agenda is the approval of the meeting agenda. Do we have any changes to the agenda as presented?
Move to approve.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
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 Thank you. Next item is approval for reading resolutions and ordinances. Vote of the City Council to read all ordinances and resolutions by title only and waive the reading in full.
So moved.
Thank you, Councilmember Parkhurst. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Councilmember Garcia. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is approval of the meeting minutes. Madam City Clerk, did you receive any changes, edits, revisions for October 26th City Council meeting?
Yes, ma'am. The City Clerk's office received 3 requests for edits from Councilmember Parkhurst, asking that the City Clerk's office elaborate on the minutes regarding the tour of the Clean Power Alliance on page 3 of the minutes. On page 7, a typo was corrected, and on page 8, under future items, it was changed from wildlife to wildlife watch program.
Thank you. Do we have any other changes, edits, corrections to the October 26 minutes? Seeing none, do we have a motion with
Move to approve.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
The next item, Mayor and City Council reports. Who would like to report out first?
I'll go first.
Mayor Pro Tem Goss?
One thing to report, actually a couple. Obviously, you're all aware that our hiring process for city manager concluded, and we've announced publicly that our interim city manager, Jose Reynosa, is going to be our next city manager, and I just wanted to acknowledge that. And I actually got to announce that for the first time Saturday morning at the Mayor's State of the City address. That's the other thing I wanted to mention. Well attended, surprisingly so, on a Saturday morning. It was kind of cool outside. The staff did a beautiful job of setting up, and I thought everything went really well. We had Troop 110 there to do the Pledge of Allegiance. We had Mr. Buckholder there to sing the national anthem and God Bless America. And our mayor got up and did another magnificent job laying out kind of where we've been for the last year and kind of giving us an idea of where we're headed. And the feedback we got immediately after the meeting was very positive, so all good. That's my report.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Goss. Who else would like to provide a report?
I have nothing to report.
Okay.
No report, Madam Mayor.
Is there a reason we're getting feedback right now? Is it maybe it's you, Councilmember Parkhurst. I wasn't sure if it was the phone, so we can check on that. Councilmember Garcia, do you have a report?
Nothing to report, just one thing of note, it's something that's happening in about actually next week, is that the CalPERS board is meeting, and I'll keep an eye on, I'm sure as our finance director will, the decision on the discount rate and what's being done with the discount rate. That's going to be vital for our city's financial health.
Okay, great, thank you. And thank you to those that attended the State of the City, and if you did not have the opportunity to attend, the address will be uploaded, we think, by next week. And just wanted to share a few highlights of the State of the City. As Mayor Pro Tem Goss shared, we did a look back, including our COVID response and what happened during that time, also the year in review, and then also looking forward. But a few highlights that I just would like to share with those of you, if you had not heard or if you did not attend. We have a $2.5 million budget surplus this year. Our city was awarded a budget award. We have 85% of our funded pension plan. We approved a solar project to offset 715 tons of carbon dioxide emissions. We've replaced 23,000 linear feet of water pipes. We had no staff reductions during the pandemic. Crime was down 11% in the last year. We've approved 30 accessory dwelling units, or ADUs, or granny flats. 20 acres of dry vegetation was cleared by 12,000 person hours and $400,000 of in-kind funding. Community services and activities were back to pre-pandemic levels, almost, right now. And then, as Mayor Pro Tem Goss, we have announced the appointment of Jose Reynoso as our new city manager. So I invite you to watch the link if, again, once it is uploaded, and I'm sure we'll share that out either via email or it'll be up on the website. Okay, so the next item on our agenda are presentations, and our first presentation is for a recognition of the 10th anniversary of one of our beloved businesses, and I'm going to ask Councilmember Parkhurst if you would like to present that and share a little bit about this presentation.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My presentation tonight is to honor the 10th anniversary of Mother Moo Creamery, which opened in 2011. And straight from their website, their goal is offering the Los Angeles area the finest ice cream in a fun environment, and it's definitely done that. I happen to love all the little plastic animals they've got on their table, as well as the patches and candy in their shelves. It truly represents the eclectic nature of Sierra Madre. And the people working there also represent our community. They're extremely thoughtful and helpful. It's a great representation of our community. And on a personal note, they helped get me through the pandemic. Some of you may know I have an allergy to dairy, but I love ice cream. And so their chocolate sorbet is absolutely fantastic. My go-to chocolate ice cream. And Mother Moo's has been and will continue to be the source of desserts for our gatherings as a family. If we're going somewhere and getting together with friends, there's always a stop at Mother Moo's to pick up a quart or two to share with folks, or a pie. So on behalf of both the City Council and our representative in the State Senate, I'd like to congratulate Mother Moo's on their 10th anniversary.
And I just want to say cornflake is definitely my favorite, so thank you, Karen.
Salted chocolate.
I like the peach.
Oh, peach is great.
Congratulations. It's always a lot of fun, too, to see where Mother Moo's will get written up, and it's we swell with pride when we see that in different magazines. So congratulations on your 10th anniversary. Okay, the next item on our agenda is a presentation by IT, or Information Technology Manager Oscar Milan, on our fiber master plan.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council. First of all, I want to thank you for the opportunity to talk about municipal fiber and the benefits that it brings to our Sierra Madre community. Before we do get started, I want to talk about the purpose and the scope of the presentation. First, basically just talk very generally about what municipal fiber is. Then we'll touch on the challenges that we face here in Sierra Madre, and then I'll speak briefly about fiber and the technology, and perhaps as well as some of the economic development that happens through fiber investments. I'll also, at a very high level, talk about available options that we have, as well as the next steps, both short-term, medium-term, and long-term. And I do want to make the note that this presentation is informational only. There is no council action that is required. All right, so let's get started. First, what are some of the challenges that we face at Sierra Madre? I think perhaps the biggest has to do with reliability. As some of the residents can attest, many of the providers here in Sierra Madre suffer from regular outages, the most frequent of which happened, as far as I can tell, on Monday morning. It lasted several hours, and it seemed to be a pretty big outage throughout the community. And this is a fairly regular occurrence. I would estimate that about once a week we get the network alerts that tell us that, in fact, there has been an outage for one of the carriers in town. The other challenge we face is that there's a lack of carrier diversity. So we don't have a lot of competition in Sierra Madre. We basically have one or two carriers that provide services for Sierra Madre. And then perhaps the last challenge, and I faced this most recently at the city yards, we asked for fiber to our water utility. We were told that there was no fiber. But being an IT professional, I'm able to recognize the assets on the pole. I pointed out those assets to Frontier, and a few months after that, we had fiber going to our utility operation. So then, why fiber? Well, fiber is the best technology that exists. It basically is a light or a laser that shoots through very thin strands of glass. It is high speed, it is low latency, and it can travel over very long distances without losing signals. That's super important for internet and connectivity. So by providing fiber to multiple locations, residents, and businesses, we really improve the type of internet that we have access to, and really future-proof the investments in Sierra Madre. And then we get into the different options. And I have one slide dedicated to each of these options. The first option being municipal fiber to the home. The second option being dark fiber networks. And the third option being a discussion of how to make some of these things happen, which is through public and private partnerships. And I have a dedicated slide for each of this, so I'll get into a little bit more detail here. So first, municipal fiber to the home. Essentially what this entails is that Sierra Madre would become a utility provider, meaning we would actually provide fiber to the home, manage and operate the utility. We would front the infrastructure cost as well as the ongoing cost of maintenance and operations. It's a full-blown operation, very similar to our water operation or our any utility. And perhaps the best example of a municipal fiber to home could be something like the city of Irvine, something along those lines. The next option is dark fiber, and dark fiber is an interesting term. All it means is that there isn't a laser or light going through that dark fiber, so it's additional capacity that exists in the ground. And with dark fiber, the city would build the fiber infrastructure, we would operate it, and we would own it, but the difference would be that in this case we're bridging the gaps that exist within a city in order to connect to the incumbent providers that already exist. So rather than having them open up trenches and run the fiber themselves, we're essentially allowing for the connections to happen and bridging all the gaps that exist in the community. The benefit about dark fiber processes is that we can lease fiber to other agencies in the community, and this becomes a recurring revenue for our operation. And I just briefly want to touch on public-private partnerships. This is something that is relatively new, and it gets a lot of traction because it has some pretty significant benefits. First, with the public-private partnership, you basically collaborate with a provider, and you share the operational cost, the administrative cost, and basically you leverage the strengths of each of the entities in order to have a comprehensive solution. So it works out pretty well, and perhaps one of the best examples of this type of partnership would be Google Fiber. Kansas City is a good example where Google partnered with Kansas City to run the municipal fiber, and they created a partnership that worked well obviously for that community. Here is a map of Sierra Madre, and this is the source is the Federal Communications Commission. As you can see, the darker areas are where there is most connectivity and fastest concentration of connectivity in the city. So as far as these self-reported maps go, Sierra Madre is really well covered in terms of broadband speed. And again, it's interesting to note that perhaps the most important part of the discussion is really focused around reliability. So although we may have really good connectivity in terms of speed, if that connection is dropping once a week, this becomes an issue that we have to address. So then let's talk about next steps. And I lay these out in a way that is, some of them are short-term, mid-term, and long-term steps. The short-term is finding the funding sources, right? We're looking at grants and creative ways to pay for these types of projects. I'm already in communication with our finance director to come up with some of these funding sources. Another step we can take is basically creating fiber-friendly policies. And some of these policies can include things like dig once policies, where anytime there is an open trench for communication lines, for electric lines, the city will ask for the vendor to lay some pipe for us to later run fiber through. And a lot of agencies have already put policies in place to allow this to happen. And then more medium term, there's a possibility to do a feasibility study. And this is a pretty comprehensive plan that basically looks at existing assets, looks at aerial as well as in-ground assets, takes inventory of the entire city, reaches out to residents and businesses, and really gives us an idea of how to best leverage existing resources to make fiber happen in Sierra Madre. It's a very comprehensive plan, and the cost is between $75,000 and $100,000 for this type of plan. And then the next step up from there would be a fiber master plan that goes one step further from a feasibility study, where it actually lays out what construction and how you actually build out the network. These are two medium and long-term goals that we can set, and we're starting to really understand what it would take, to try to make some of these things happen. And of course, it goes without saying that we will continue to work with the current providers and the ISPs that already exist to better understand what types of investments they're already making and planning for here in the city of Sierra Madre. I realize there's a lot of information here. I do want to say that a lot of this is preliminary. We're really wrapping our brains around the scope and the extent of the project, but I am happy to take any questions that you have about the presentation or about fiber in general.
Thank you, Manager Milan. I think it provided a really good overview of, I think, what the council was looking for, but I want to ask if council has any direct questions for you.
Madam Mayor?
Councilmember Creeps?
Yes, this was great. Thank you so much. I know there's been a lot of talk about the various funding bills, both at the state level and multiple bills coming from the federal level. The infrastructure bill, I think, that just passed has some earmarking for broadband and fiber. Are we exploring options in terms of public funding at the state, county, state, federal level?
Yeah, absolutely. To the extent that we will tap into any funding that's available, you know, the finance director and I have already started those conversations. The one thought that I want to share with all of you is that as we dug a little bit deeper into the funding sources, we've identified that a lot of the federal funds, and in fact some of the state funds as well, are really focused towards underserved or rural areas. So we will run into some of those challenges, but I know we have a really sharp finance director, and you know, we'll put our heads together and see where we can get funding.
I agree with you there. Thank you.
Any other questions for Manager Milan?
Madam Mayor,
Councilmember Parkhurst.
can you give us an idea on the three different options, the relative costs to them, or the cost magnitude? Which is more, which is less?
Sure. So the feasibility plan is between $75,000 and $100,000. The master plan is a little more comprehensive than the feasibility plan, but the difference is that it's a little bit more detailed and a little bit more comprehensive about the final construction and the scope of the network. But I want to be a little bit more clear about the fact that the feasibility plan built on top of or the other way around, I'm sorry, the master plan built on top of the feasibility plan. So if we complete the feasibility plan first, then the master plan is only about 20% that is left of those costs. So for example, all in, doing both the feasibility and the master plan may be about $125,000 or so. That's a good budgetary number.
And what about the different options? On the option one, the municipal fiber to home, dark fiber, and public-private partnership,
Yeah.
do we have an idea on the relative magnitude of cost between those?
So it's very difficult to quantify that now, and part of the reason why that is because we haven't analyzed current assets. We don't know what's out there. We don't know, you know, the state of different conduits or aerial fiber that already exist. So part of the feasibility approach is that we get a lot of clarity on all those assets, right? And then once we have a better idea what's out there, then we can come up with a better number on the cost of either replacing some of those conduits, running new fiber, making the connections that need to be made. So it's very difficult without doing at least an initial feasibility assessment to know what those costs can be.
Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Goss?
Outstanding report, by the way. I have Spectrum at home, and occasionally it goes down, and I find myself using my old iPhone hotspot on a 4G Verizon network, and that is adequate until, you know, Spectrum comes back.
Sure.
What I'm wondering is if and when 5G becomes a reality for Sierra Madre and I can use 5G through Verizon, how would that compare to the fiber optic connection in terms of speed?
Gotcha. So it's entirely different technology. What I will say is that fiber is a lot more scalable and a lot more reliable than 5G will ever be. One of the biggest challenges you run into with 5G is that it's very dependent on the distance to the cell tower. So you know, you get very quick drops depending on the distance you are from the cell tower, whereas 4G, which is LTE and what exists now, seems to carry a little bit you know, further away. I don't see 5G replacing fiber. I think it would be more of an addition or an augmentation of fiber resources. But certainly if you are lucky enough to be next to a 5G micro cell tower, I mean, you can get incredibly fast speeds. So the goal there would be to try to blanket Sierra Madre with 5G and try to, you know, really tap into that. One other item I'll throw out there is that, you know, there are some new low Earth orbit satellite technologies that are coming to the mainstream, particularly with a company that is SpaceX. They have the Starlink operation that is about to go live in a wider area. And that's something that I think would be, an option for that, backup internet functionality.
So you're gonna stay on top of that?
I always do. I always do.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Garcia?
Thank you for that excellent report. So yeah, I have a couple questions and concerns. So I'm thinking about the municipal fiber to home and the scalability, and given the size of our municipality, and thinking about staff, thinking about routers and modems and all that. So we would have to have hardware, and I think it sounds like a huge task for such a small town. But this is obviously a very important consideration for our residents, as most of us or a lot of us are working at home more often, if not exclusively, and having half a day of no Wi-Fi or internet rather is unacceptable. So I applaud the city for looking into this. So I'm thinking maybe the dark fiber networks or the public-private partnerships are probably the way to go. But thinking about those public-private partnerships and incentives, have you seen any municipalities such as the size of ours that has actually engaged in something like this? Have you, in your research, have you seen any of that? Like Irvine's obviously large relative to us.
So the interesting thing about the public-private partnerships is that, as we iron out the details, we can set up the partnership however we want, right? So it doesn't mean that you split the resources in a very specific way. You basically size it to the size of the operation. You can agree to various terms, but it really is up to both agencies or both partners to figure out what works best for them. You're certainly right that larger agencies like the City of Irvine have a little bit more resources when it comes to public-private partnerships, and they also have a little bit more leverage. But I don't think it's out of the question. I think we should try to punch a little higher and see where we land.
All right. Thank you.
Can I follow that up? Aside from Google, could you name any other companies that are doing this? These partnerships?
There's.
I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
No. So every provider, there's different levels of partnerships. Google is the most front-facing, and obviously they have a lot of resources. But we can create a public-private partnership with any carrier that we wish to work with. So, for example,
there are others doing is what I get.
Every carrier is open to this type of arrangement, so long as you agree to terms. I think what's important about the public-private partnership is that, we leverage our strengths and we leverage their strengths in order to make the project a reality.
Madam Mayor, one follow-up. So the examples that you cited, Irvine, Kansas City, and I'm sure there are others that you saw, are you aware of whether this actually becomes a positive revenue source for those cities, or is it mainly, as Councilmember Garcia said, a needed service for their residents?
Right. Some organizations will only move forward with these projects if they see that it is going to be a revenue type operation. Other agencies decide to absorb the costs. So, those are decisions we would have to make. And part of the feasibility study will tell us the take rate in our city, and give us an idea of how many residents would potentially, both residents and businesses, would sign up for the services, and even how much they would be willing to pay for different speeds. So we would have a very good idea about the profitability of becoming an ISP after the feasibility study.
Okay, well, thank you so much for the presentation, Manager Milan.
Thank you again for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
Next, we will have our Interim Director of Utilities to present the statewide drought emergency. And I apologize that I could not see you last Saturday, so now the floor is yours. You get to have the spotlight.
Okay, Madam Mayor, anytime I can slip into anonymity, it's okay by me. Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem, and Council. Going to give you guys a brief statewide drought emergency and how it pertains to Sierra Madre. I want to start with our goal here. The first is this is to inform you, the council, and the community that the city of Sierra Madre has made the necessary investments in water resource and resource management to help us get through a multi-year drought. What's happening in California is the western United States is facing its potential third year of drought. And on October 19th, Governor Gavin Newsom declared a statewide drought emergency for all 58 counties in California. What this means is a 15% voluntary reduction in water by residents and businesses. Also, the State Water Resource Control Board may look to adopt regulations to stop water waste. This note is particularly interesting for Sierra Madre because of regulations we already have on the books. And I'll get to that in a couple of slides here. So what are the resources that we have for us? We have our Raymond Basin adjudication rights. This water we can pump out of the ground. We have our West Tunnel facility, our natural spring. We have our connection to the San Gabriel Valley Municipal Water District. And we have rights to the main San Gabriel Basin. Let's look at the investments that Sierra Madre has made. We've established our 2020 Urban Water Management Plan earlier this year. Stetson Engineering put that together, and it is a 5-year management action plan for long-term resource planning to ensure that we have adequate water now and in the future. We also updated our city's water conservation program. This just gives city ideas and plans and maybe even projects to help them conserve. Just a point of note for this too, we presented this to the districts after we presented it to you, and they said we should be a model for all the other cities going forth. The next one, we implemented permanent conservation measures to the city municipal code. That was Ordinance 1446 that happened earlier this year. This is where it gets interesting for us, is that if the State Water Resource Control Board decides to implement regulations for water waste, we already have them on the books. We're ahead of the bar. Common sense values like no watering your turf lawns, no watering your sidewalks. We put those on the books already. They're in our municipal code, so we're ahead of the game. Yet another thing Sierra Madre could be a model for. We have our Arcadia Joint Well Agreement. Once constructed, will provide us water from the district, from the main San Gabriel Basin. And we have our distribution mainline replacement projects. We actually have some of that on the book of the agenda tonight. Infrastructure, we're continuing to do this. And another little side note is we do have our AMI that we've put together, and it does let us read meters accurately, and we get the water production from that side as well. Sierra Madre's available water. We have the Raymond Basin rights. We have 940 acre-feet of water. We have our connection from San Gabriel Valley Municipal Water District, which is a 2,500 acre-feet of water for a total of over 3,400 acre-feet of water. City Sierra Madre's water use. So I put together a couple of these charts for you guys based on our reports that we do for the state, just to show you that we do have, the top one is water production, and we did it based on fiscal year, so we've only been through July through October this year, so I put together the top line showing you this year and what we did the past 2 years based on that, just to show you we're right in line. 983 acre-feet, 956 acre-feet, and then this year 975 acre-feet produced out of the ground thus far. The line below that shows you a full fiscal year. Obviously, we haven't been through a full fiscal year this year, but just to show you where we are, 2,300 acre-feet, 2,400 acre-feet, and we're projecting, based on what we've seen in the last couple of years, we'll do 2,400 to 2,500 acre-feet of water. Right below that's water spreading. This is where you look at it and you go, we've already spread the water into the ground. You can see what we've done the last couple of years. Same thing, top line shows you what we've done to date in the last 2 years, and then bottom line shows you fiscal year, what we're projecting for our year this year. We've already put most of that water in the ground, so we have it available. The water is available to us already, we have it. This is a state water averages page. I just wanted to put this up here to show you guys some of the averages of the state. This is based on January to August 2021. The averages are based on total production of water. That's the entire system, what they produce. We didn't really think we wanted to do that for Sierra Madre. We wanted to show a true residential use, so I went in and did the math, and we based it on metered consumption, single-family homes, single-family meters, multifamily meters. And we got a number of 99 gallons per day per capita. That's gallons per day per person on average. If you can see, the states is 93 gallons per day per capita. I like to look at this as glass half full. This city's been through a lot lately, and we've really strived to conserve, excuse me, we've strived to stay together as a community and do our part. 99 is pretty close to the state average. The glass half empty part is going to be, it is not on total production, that's what the state does. And it kind of what it shows us is that if we do run into something down the way with the state, we have some wiggle room. We have some room to conserve. So we told you what the state is doing. We showed you what they're asking for. We showed you our investments. We showed you our water and our water use. Based on our urban water management, what is our guiding document, and the water we have available to ourselves through the Raymond Basin and the SGV MWD connection, staff is not recommending any water shortage contingency phases needed for fiscal year 2021-2022. We'll of course keep the council informed. Starting in early 2022, we will be doing the annual assessment, and through that assessment, the council will be apprised of that, and we'll be able to make decisions based on 2022-2023. All that being said, everything I've said before, if conditions in California don't change, the state could impose mandatory conservation measures. If that happens, and in that situation, we would have to comply with whatever contingency phase fits their imposing X. That concludes my presentation. I'll take any questions you guys could have.
Thank you, Director McGee. Mayor Pro Tem, you have a question?
Fine report, Interim Director. One quick question. How much do you have a kind of a closer ballpark on how much we've spread already this year? Are we near the maximum, and if so, how close?
So no, we're not. So what we've done to this date right now, if we include, this report was put together a couple days ago, we do about 11 acre feet a day when we're fully opened. So we've done somewhere near 1,250.
Oh, wow.
So
Okay.
we'll stop at 1,300 feet when we get to that, and that'll be the completion for this year. That's water in the ground.
Right.
You understand, we've extracted 975 acre feet, which we saw. We have 940 feet of beautification. Now, every time we take an acre foot out of the water, we have to replenish it. So we've put that water in the ground already.
Right.
So we have it available. So it's there for us.
Right. That's
So-
great. Thank you.
I have a quick question. The state water averages, that's gallons per day. What was the other?
Gallons
PC?
per day per capita or
Per
gallons per
capita.
day per person on average.
So we're still on the higher end when compared to LA and San Diego. So it still goes to show that there still can be some additional conservation measures we're taking as individuals and as residents, especially when we're comparing to some of the surrounding cities, correct?
Sure. If you take a subsidiary of them, Pacific Institute, they take the information that the State Water Resource Control Board puts out, and they actually will do city by city. We're in the red. I mean, when it comes down to it, we are in the red by months a lot of times. And that's total production again. We wanted to be fair and show, I think it's fair to show residents what they're doing. So that's why we decided to go with that. But yes, we have room. We have room to wiggle, but I just want to make a point of this city has done its part. It's very much trying to do its part, and we understand the strain that they've gone through, and we're right there with them.
Well, we're not Kern, so.
No, I wanted to put Kern on there to show you that these northern states, these northern counties really do use water in excess.
Do you have any other questions?
Madam Mayor?
Yeah, Councilmember Parkhurst.
So what can we learn from LA and San Diego that we can implement here in Sierra Madre?
I put that on there because I like to show where we are. What we learned from them is that they're in a different temperature class sometimes. San Diego County's temperatures are much lighter than ours. LA County there's a lot of big homes with big meters, things like that. So what we've learned is just that when it comes to Sierra Madre, I believe we are trending the right way. But if there's an implementation of any kind of contingency phase, there's room. The city will have room to maneuver. Those numbers that I gave you, the 99, it's more like 135 if you do the math for full consumption of that.
Thank you. Councilmember Garcia.
Yes, and this is kind of jumping off the question and comment that the mayor had. When we're thinking about Sierra Madre relative to other cities and counties, we don't have the high occupancy on a parcel that some of these other cities do have. So when we're looking per capita, it makes sense that we're a little bit higher to me. Not that that's great, but I'm just saying it's kind of a metric that we want to make sure that we're thinking about. Because, if we're coming down the line, we don't want a crystal ball here, but let's say that the governor of the state has some mandatory restrictions. My question to you is, generally, are those per person or are those per parcel? if you know historically how those have been.
So they're gonna do and I can, excuse me, they're gonna do that based on our total adjudication, I believe. So when they do that, I did the math, we don't wanna see anything, but if we reduced 30%, we'd still be able to produce the water that we need for this year. On the math basis like that, so if they came out and said 10% contingency, 20%, we should be able to facilitate our water for this fiscal year. Going forward, what they're going to do, I can only dabble and make my opinion that based on California trends, rain that we've been having, snowpack, my opinion says over the other side of the new year, we might be seeing something. But what it's going to be exactly, I don't know.
You understand that we'll probably have the supply side, right? Because the
we've-
department has done an amazing job of generational forecasting, but I'm thinking about the demand and the use side of us residents. We're looking at a metric, if we're looking at a per person metric relative to other cities that have, no yards, a lot of high occupancy housing, they're really just, using indoor watering rather than some outdoor watering like we do here. So my question is, are they generally supply side metrics? I think you said they are,
Yes,
or are
yes,
they?
sir.
Okay.
It was just a fun little thing to put in there so you guys could see where Sierra Madre sits.
That's
But,
great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Madam Mayor?
Councilmember Creeps?
So, yeah, I appreciate that you reduced this to kind of usage versus production, and I assume that the delta, or part of the delta between consumption and production is the aged state of our infrastructure and the high percentage of lost water through that. Do you have a sense of, I know we've improved vastly over the last few years when we've been doing the replacement, and I know we have another project to discuss tonight on that basis, but do you have a sense of how much that waste gets remedied by these new water main replacement projects?
So not so much the water mains are a problem, and when we left out irrigation meters, we left out commercial, we left out a bunch of things that it does go to as well. We just wanted to show metered consumption, but through our water loss audit, we're going to do another one this year. We were able to take, I believe, 30% down to 15%. So we do see reduction. We're trending in the right direction. We'll do that, and then when that comes out, we'll present that to you guys to see how much more we've done. But yeah, infrastructure. Doing these water main projects is supremely important. We are losing water. I do think we have a fantastic, and that's just not me being impartial, but we have a fantastic crew who jumps on things immediately and does things extraordinary. So yes, I think you can see in the full spectrum that we've done 30% to 15%. That's fantastic. Whether it's just the mainline projects, I don't believe that's all of it.
Got it.
It's consumption.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, thank you so much for your presentation. Interim Director McGee. The next item we have on our agenda is public comment, and this is for items not on the agenda. And if you're here to comment on the housing element, that will be the first item on our public hearing following the consent calendar. I do know we have a couple of comment cards, so Madam City Clerk, if you'd like to call those names out, please. And once your name is called, if you can make your way down to the podium, you have 3 minutes, and you have a timer there. And if you could just please say your name and your general address.
The first speaker is Rich Proctor.
Hello, Rich Proctor. I'm a trustee for the Sierra Madre Public Library. I'm here for a happy purpose. I'm here to announce the 2022 One Book, One City, a book for the library. This time we've decided to go right for it. We went to the New York Times bestseller list, and we've chosen a book called The Midnight Library
Oh, yeah.
by Matt Haig. It's a book that's getting a lot of buzz, and rightly so. It's a very interesting and engaging and transformative book that has really captured the imagination of the American public. I've heard it said one time that life is a matter of grief and gratitude, those two things together. And I heard the word gratitude mentioned earlier tonight. And this is the story of a woman who moves from grief to gratitude. She has an extraordinary opportunity. She finds herself in kind of a purgatory-like space. You'll have to read the book to see how the author handles this. And she walks into a library where every book is a life that she didn't lead. So if she takes a book out, she can find out what would have happened if she had, say, she had a chance to be in a rock band, and she always regretted it. Well, so she said, well, I'm going to really find out that being in this rock band was the greatest thing of all time. And of course, what she discovers is that it's much more complex than she thought. And she, like George Bailey in It's a Wonderful Life, she comes to see her life in a completely new way that flips her attitude about it and moves her from grief to gratitude. Let me read you a brief quote from the book to give you some kind of an idea of what the author's up to. He said, "If you aim to be something you are not, you will always fail. Aim to look and act and think like you. Aim to be the truest version of you. Embrace the you-ness. Endorse it, love it, work hard at it. And don't give a second thought when people mock or ridicule it. Most gossip is envy in disguise." So people are going to read this book and they're going to embrace their you-ness. We're going to have somebody come up in a couple of weeks and explain our program events. We have a full program of events for the month. This is the month of February 2022. Once again, the book is The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Proctor. That sounds like a book up right up my alley. So
Yes, I guarantee it's a rare example of an author who had a really sensational idea and knew how to execute it perfectly.
Looking
It's
forward
just
to
like,
it.
Boy,
Thank
it's
you.
great. Anyway, thank you.
Madam City Clerk, the next speaker, please.
The next speaker, ma'am, is Deb Sheridan.
Good evening, council members. Deb Sheridan, Valley Vista Drive. And I just have one question for an item not on the agenda. There are no trespassing signs all over 1 Carter, and I would like to know why, because is this not a city street? So you're probably not allowed to answer, but thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sheridan. I don't know if it's about allowed to answer, but we'll get the answer for you. What I understood is that it's no trespassing on the lots itself, but the streets are still public, but we'll get clarification on that as I'm looking at Director Semino, and maybe you could just let us know, because we're going to actually have a recess, I think, to set up the phone, so we'll follow up with you. Next speaker card.
Madam Mayor, the next speaker is Tricia Searcy.
Good evening, Tricia Searcy, 734 Fairview Avenue. And tonight I want to bring your attention to a problem. I feel bad following that lovely statement that was so beautiful, but what I had to say is not as fun. Residents have been having a problem getting responses to public records requests. There have been ongoing delays, and some requests still have not been answered, and the city hasn't provided any legal justification for not producing them. Specifically, there's been a problem obtaining documents related to MIG's third-party review of the DEIR and the specific plan. These are important documents. Time is of the essence. We're in the middle of the process, and residents are being prejudiced by the delay. They're trying to participate, and they're being thwarted by the city. So I've written to the city attorney numerous times, and I feel like I'm being given the runaround. I've included the latest correspondence as a public comment. I think it got submitted late, but they said it would be forwarded to you. So one problem is that in response to certain requests related to MIG, the city attorney drafted an amendment to the city's contract with MIG to transfer ownership of the documents from the city to MIG to shield the documents for public review. But you can't do that. You can see my letter for the law on that. It's not legal to do that. It also doesn't look to me like the amendment to the MIG contract was ever presented to City Council, let alone approved, so I'm wondering about that. And I'm looking for some assurance that the city is going to produce documents that are responsive to these requests, including the documents related to MIG's review, previous reviews and any reviews that are coming up in response to requests, so that residents can participate in the process in an educated way. And I feel like it's incumbent on the city attorney, the city clerk, to help residents seeking information, not to hinder their requests. The city attorney's expressed concern over potential litigation, and my response to that is the best way to avoid litigation is to produce responsive documents that the city is required to produce. Residents have the right to review these documents. MIG's third-party review of the Meadows DEIR is part and parcel of the conduct of the public's business. I'm asking you, the City Council, to find a way to make sure that this gets done. The city attorney's kicked it back over to the city clerk, and I don't really care who does it. I'm not sure how much more I can do. I'm not looking for litigation. I'm just looking to get responses from the city. So please do what you can do to help residents get the documents that they're seeking so that they can participate. And again, I just want to say that time is of the essence, and the delays prejudice the residents. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Ms. Garcia. And we'll definitely look into the public records request. From what I understand, we're compliant with what needs to go out within a timely manner, but we'll double check to make sure.
Yeah, because they're not.
So we'll get back to you. Thanks. Okay, the next item.
The next speaker is Lynn Coleman.
Yes. Good evening, Mayor and council members. I'm Lynn Coleman, Carter Avenue. I'd like to make a few comments about the draft EIR review process and public input. The process seemed a bit rushed and not inclusive, and you may have felt the same as well. Too much focus on the deadline and not the substance. It is understood that the state put a burden on us to comply with the housing element, but if there were ever extenuating circumstances to allow additional time for thorough review and public input, we had them. While everyone carried the burden of COVID restrictions, we uniquely had 2 draft EIRs released at the same time, a total of over 4,000 pages. It was unfortunate that the housing element issue and the Monastery project EIRs were released almost simultaneously and shared a common 49-day review period. This made it all but impossible for working folks to read both, provide meaningful comments, and be able to participate in city matters. This is important because Sierra Madre wouldn't be the community it is today without our volunteers and citizen input. This is the same community the City Council and to volunteer in all aspects of Sierra Madre life. And some of these groups are our volunteer firefighters, CERT, our emergency communications team, Kiwanis, Community Foundation, Mountain Conservancy, Chamber of Commerce, etc. It's telling that there were only 16 comments submitted for the draft SEIR. Could it be because we failed to engage the community in this process from the beginning? Unlike the extensive work by many volunteers on the 2015 general plan, this revision was updated by a consultant with only one public scoping meeting held in July of this year, 2 weeks before the draft SEIR was circulated and 25 residents attended. Expecting and counting on volunteers to contribute to Sierra Madre, but then not soliciting and welcoming their input in critical city issues is disconcerting. As the city reviews these important issues, it becomes clear information presented at public meetings needs to be more comprehensive and understandable. This need is compounded by the limited ability to ask questions and get answers for clarification, with no ability to ask follow-up questions. The public meeting forum is again proving that it is not the appropriate one for a meaningful, thorough presentation, discussion, and Q&A on a large issue or project. Having 3 minutes to comment does little to further this goal or to ask questions that may or not be answered. It doesn't facilitate communication, an exchange of ideas, or our important goal of transparency. Let me conclude by saying it's understood council meetings are for the purpose of discussing and dispensing with routine city business. We're privileged to attend and observe. We're grateful for the 3 minutes that were given to comment, and most of the time that's perfectly adequate. But for community-altering general plan updates that significantly impact the city for the next 8 years, it clearly is not. Please recognize this and come up with a satisfactory alternative that allows for open communication for future projects. Thank you.
Okay, Okay, do we have another comment card, Madam City Clerk?
We did not receive any additional comment cards. There were 2 emails that were received.
Okay, if you can go ahead and either summarize or read them, and also ensure that we have the name of the person that submitted, please.
Yes, ma'am. The first email was received from Lou Losarelli, and Lou Losarelli writes that in regards to transportation discussion at the Planning Commission meeting that was held on November 4th, and the concerns are about the small portion of the residents not being able to present at formal meetings. So the request is to vote down the particular proposal and fight for those who are appointed to represent. And this is in regards to the traffic impact of the Monastery project and the fees that those consultants receive to do the work. The second email is from Gary Hood, and this is in regards to the work being done by Preserve Sierra Madre. The email goes on to say that the city has $2 million extra in the budget and would like to see that money be spent on defending and preserving our community of Sierra Madre.
Thank you. And I know council received both of those emails too. Thank you. Okay.
Madam Mayor?
Yeah.
I think there's one other person who would like to speak.
Oh, please. Okay.
We have 2. I know Mr. Gordon is trying to
Oh,
speak.
okay. Thank you.
This is for the public hearing.
Okay. Mr. Gordon, do you have an item not in the agenda that you'd like to comment on? Great. Please make your way to the podium.
David Gordon, Fairview Avenue, in my guise as president of the Sierra Madre Playhouse. Can I take this off while I speak?
Sorry, I know.
In that case, I will have to shout. So I'm the sort of entertainment part of the proceedings. We have taken a very cautious line about reopening our 99-seat theatre. We did a survey of our audience a few weeks ago to find out how likely they would be to come and attend a live performance, even with vaccination and masks and so on. And the figure we got back was 70% said they would, which means that 30% said they would not. This was an improvement on the previous time we did our survey. But we can't afford to open with a potential audience of 70%. We need to go for 100%. So we have decided to postpone the play we were going to put on, the one-man performance we were going to do, which was a one-man version of It's a Wonderful Life called This Wonderful Life. So we have arranged to postpone that to next year. That will be our Christmas show next year. And the next live performance is likely to be King of the Yees, which will be held in the spring. In the meantime, we are going to be increasing our showings of movies. As everybody knows, the Sierra Madre Playhouse was a movie house for much of its life. So we're going to be having 3 showings of the film It's a Wonderful Life on December the 1st, 8th and 15th. These films will be introduced by none other than Rich Proctor, who unfortunately left the meeting as soon as he had given his performance. He left unable to watch my performance. So I'm pretty upset about that, Rich. Anyway, he's going to be talking about the film before it begins. And in the first 3 months of the year, we're going to have a series of famous silent film comedies which will have musical accompaniment. So that's to get you to know that although we're not doing live theatre, we are actively trying to engage the community on things which are low cost and high impact. Anybody who's not on the mailing list yet for the Sierra Madre Playhouse, please go to the website and sign up. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Gordon. Okay, and I understand the card is for our public comment. So, Mr. Arietta, is your comment on something not on the agenda?
I do.
Great.
I got here late from work, so I wasn't able to submit a card, but I do have a couple of comments. One was in regards to the Planning Commission meeting that happened, occurred last week. I was very concerned about one of the consultants who spoke about the traffic, specifically on Sunnyside. And she made a comment to the effect of the capacity for Sunnyside is up to 2,500 cars. And I think everyone who was in attendance and heard that comment was struck by it. And you could have heard people just have a collective breath, like, what is she talking about? And there is a real deep appreciation that was lacking, and I'm raising it because I think it's incumbent upon all of you to grasp how significant this is when a consultant that is hired makes a comment that says the city and this street, Sunnyside, can handle up to 2,500 cars without an appreciation for what the impact of that is to not just Sunnyside, but to the other surrounding communities. It frankly puts that study in terms of the analysis, and there were some other glaringly wrong things that were done around her analysis that were called out in the meeting, but it kind of puts a glaring spotlight on a total lack of understanding and appreciation for what an impact like that can do to this community. So I wanted to bring it to your attention because it's important for you to understand what that's about. There was also a comment made around 500 cars, and that's what the estimated impact would be with the Monastery project. 500 additional cars coming up on Sunnyside also not being a significant impact. And that's double of what it is today. It's about 120% increase in terms of what would be expected. The second point I wanted to raise was also to echo around the insufficiency of meetings like this to be able to have appropriate discussion and dialogue around city altering projects like the Monastery project. It's just not sufficient. It's not expected that all of you are going to take time to read 4,000 pages of the DIR and the SEIR and so forth, like many of us did. But then to not even have the opportunity beyond 3 minutes to talk and engage about what the serious issues are and concerns are the residents have is appalling. And I think there is an imperative that this group needs to come up with, this body needs to come up with, that allows for public dialogue in terms of a working meeting, and not facilitated by New Urban West, by the way, but someone else who can be objective. And I think the opportunity for discourse and for getting honest input and opinion for all of you to hear truly what the citizens think is going to be more evident. Last thing is on PIR. I echo the concerns around that. The delays in getting important documents is ridiculous, and it's impeding our ability to execute on what we need to do appropriately and timely. So that has to change.
Thank you. Again, we'll look into the public records requests. Okay, any other comments for items not on the agenda? Okay, so we have one.
I wasn't going to do this until Alex said something about it, and I'm new to coming to all of the city council meetings. I have known each one of you in a way by myself one-on-one. But when you come and you turn the clock on, and the last time I spoke to you, I ignored it because I had stuff I wanted to get to you.
Ms. Beckham, can you come closer to the mic so
Sure,
we can hear you?
I can come closer.
Yeah.
Anyway, what bothers me is I can't talk to you about any of these things other than presenting my side. And that's a great concern because we don't learn much unless we can dialogue back and forth. Unlike the Planning Commission, where I can come and talk to them and I can say, do you have a question? They'll come right back at me. And we can discuss things and we can clarify things so that things get done. But when I come to talk to you, I'm telling you what I think, and it's like I'm talking to a wall. And that's what I'm worried about. And I don't really think any of you are ignoring me. I just think that there's got to be a better way to get this done, and Alex alluded to it. The back and forth that happens at the Planning Commission is back and forth. It's question, answer, clarification, and then we all go on to the next thing. But I don't feel that way with you. And I don't know how to get it done other than to tell you. And that's all I have to say right now. Thank you.
Okay, any other items for public comment not on the agenda? Okay, Seeing none, we'll move on to action items and consent calendar. Madam City Clerk, can you present on the consent items, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Before the City Council for consideration this evening are 6 items on the consent calendar. Consent item A is consideration of Resolution 21-65 approving certain demands. And it is recommended that the City Council approve payment of city warrants in the aggregate amount of $394,727.88. Sierra Madre Library warrants in the aggregate amount of $4,723.91. And the payroll transfer in the aggregate amount of $408,384.65 for the fiscal year ending June 30, 2022. Consent item B is AB 1600 Annual Compliance Report for Development Impact Fee Activity. Staff recommends that the City Council and receive and file this report. Consent item C is the Treasurer's Report for the quarter ending June 30, 2021. It is recommended that the City Council also receive and file this report. Consent item D is consideration of Resolution 21-62 adopting the Memorandum of Understanding between the City of Sierra Madre and the Police Association, and also Resolution 21-63 amending the classification plan and salary matrix for the Police Association. It is recommended that the City Council approve Resolution 21-62 adopting the Police Association Memorandum of Understanding, and also approve Resolution 21-63 amending the classification plan and salary matrix in order to implement the negotiated cost of living adjustments for full-time employees covered under the Police Association. Consent item E is the second reading of Ordinance 1447 adding Section 8.14 Organic Waste Disposal Reduction to the Sierra Madre Municipal Code related to mandatory commercial and multifamily residential recycling. It is recommended that the City Council introduce for second reading by title only and adopt Ordinance 1447, adding Section 8.14 Organic Waste Disposal Reduction to the Sierra Madre Municipal Code. And lastly, consent item F is the consideration of award of construction contract for the fiscal year 2021-2022 water main replacement project, segment 4, to an amount not to exceed $2,500,000 to Big Ben Inc. It is recommended that the City Council award this contract for $2,500,000 for the fiscal year 2021-2022 water main replacement project, section 4, to Big Ben Inc. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Madam City Clerk. Do you have any questions for any of the consent items? Any questions on A? Item A, questions on B, C, D, E, or F?
Madam Mayor.
Councilmember Creeps.
So regarding the award of the construction contract for the water main replacement project, I don't know how much the public looks at the staff reports in detail, but I wanted to, based on a lot of requests and feedback that we've gotten from residents lately, just to highlight that segment 4, which is what this contract is meant to cover, does cover Churchill Road and the area of the Upper Canyon. I think that's right. That has been of great concern given the number of leaks and the county work that's been going on up there, and so I just wanted to highlight that. And I did have one question about the contingency. I don't know who to direct that to.
Maybe that would be, it would be Director Semino. And thank you for highlighting that, because that came up as an issue, not only during the council meeting last time, but also numerous emails for Churchill.
Just wondering, I know that you've recommended a little over $100,000 as a contingency, and I just wondered if that was in line with what we've seen recently in contingency or work order additions in past projects with Big Ben for this type of project.
Yeah, normally we ask for about a 10% contingency, but $2.5 million is our budgeted amount this year, so we were just sticking to that 210. So it leaves about 100,000 for contingencies. Working in the canyon, a lot of things come up. The last time we worked in the lower canyon, our contingency didn't cover the change orders. We had to come back and ask for more. But this one, the upper canyon is a little bit different, so we're going to do our best to stick to that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing there are no other questions on consent items, We'd like to open this up for public comment. Would anyone like to comment on any of the consent items?
Madam Mayor, we have a speaker card from Katrina Hicks-Tuff for this question, for consent item 1F.
Hi there. I came last time, so I think I'm a familiar face. Nice to see you all again. First of all, I want to say thank you to Chris and Stephen and to Jose, and congratulations on working on this so hard. And I appreciate you guys listening to us. The fixing the water mains, it will return our lives to us. Because honestly, when you have pneumatic drills going at all times of the day and night, and listening to the presentation about water leakage, I guarantee you most of the water leakage that Sierra Madre is experiencing, I'm enjoying with my dogs as I walk through the lake and the river that we have down our streets. I know it's a lot of money, but it's beyond necessary. So we'd really ask, and I know you got a lot of comments from neighbours again, because neighbours were letting me know that they were writing in again, that this is something that really matters to us in the Upper Canyon, and we really hope that you'll approve it. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment for consent calendar items? Seeing none, we'll bring it back for discussion. Further comments?
Move to approve.
Thank you, Councilor McCreez. Do you have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Councilmember Garcia. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Thank you. Seeing that is a unanimous vote, the motion carries. Okay, we're just going to take a 2-minute break. We have a phone call we need to set up to make sure that our consultant, Curtis Sakato, can join us via phone. He was unable to make it today. So we'll just take 2 minutes to do a quick pause, and we will recess and we will reconvene.
confirmed, so the RPA pedestrian access, so no trespassing in response to the construction.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, Curtis. It's James here with the City of Sierra Madre.
Yes.
We're testing the phone here. How does it sound?
It sounds perfect. Thank you.
Very good. We go ahead and we'll be waiting for questions and hopefully be able to provide some great answers.
Okay, I'll put you on mute now.
All right, thanks, Curtis.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks everyone. We are going to reconvene. Our next agenda item is our public hearing for consideration of Resolution 21-59, approving General Plan Amendment 21-03 to adopt the 2021-2029 housing element. This is a continuation from our meeting 2 weeks ago. We do have our consultant, Curtis Zacato, that is joining us, and he is our EIR consultant that is joining us by phone, but I believe we have Karen Warner here joining us. But to present on this item, we have Senior Planner Lynn, please.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and members of the City Council. This evening, we're going to review the General Plan Amendment for the adoption of the sixth cycle housing element in the planning year 2021 to 2029, including land use element, safety element, and circulation element updates, and the certification of subsequent environmental impact report. Continue from the October 26th public hearing, we will go over what was discussed and updated since last meeting. Joining us this evening is our housing consultant, Ms. Karen Warner of Karen Warner Associate, and our environmental consultant, Mr. Curtis Zacuto of Eco Tierra, is on the call. They will be providing updates to the element, final SEIR, and be available for questions. Lastly is the staff recommendation and City Council action. At the last meeting, we reviewed the regional housing need assessment that City of Sierra Madre is tasked to plan for 204 housing units divided into 4 different income categories in the 8-year planning period. To plan for the RENA that our city is assigned for, we look at different contributions towards RENA, such as accessory dwelling units, rezone multifamily sites with a higher density, and create an option for church sites to allow housing by overlay zone and end up with a sufficient site inventory. Illustrated on the map, it identified 4 multifamily sites planned to be densified up to 20 dwelling unit per acre and 30 dwelling unit per acre. 2 church sites to allow housing, and all of the potential sites are outside of Measure V. This is the revised land use map with the updated 6 proposed sites. They're outlined in red. The rezone sites are listed as below Site 1 on Mariposa, Site 2, the block on Suffolk, Site 3 is at the Park and Sierra Madre Boulevard. Site number 4 is 215 North Baldwin at the corner of Baldwin and Laurel. And to implement the housing program, Municipal Code text amendment and zone change for the rezone sites will be adopted after the adoption of the housing element. These are the religious housing overlay zone, and it will apply to 2 church sites. One is Old North Church and United Methodist Church, and it shows the potential capacity for affordable housing unit. This is in line with Assembly Bill 1851, which allowed for 50% reduction in religious use parking spaces to accommodate affordable housing. And now I'll turn it over to Karen to speak about the updates to our elements.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the City Council. I just wanted to start out by explaining the addendum that you have to your staff report, Attachment G, and it's also on the dais. We had submitted a revised housing element to the State Department of Housing and Community Development based on their comment letter. And they have up to 60 days to review any subsequent draft of the element. We requested a shortened 30-day review since it was very focused, just responding to their comments. They're extremely busy right now, and they said, we'll try, but, we can't promise anything. So as we were getting closer to your council hearing date 2 weeks ago, we were contacting them very frequently to try to get any additional feedback so we would know whether we had complied with all of the comments in the letter. Because we weren't able to get any feedback prior to the meeting 2 weeks ago. We continued contacting them, knowing that tonight is the night that's scheduled for adoption. We were able to schedule a call with them yesterday, and went through verbally, some outstanding concerns they had on the element. The easy fixes, that's what's before you in the addendum, things that we were able to do within a 24-hour turnaround. The larger issues, and this is common with all the elements that the state's reviewing now, is the justification on the non-vacant sites, and then the assessment of fair housing. So those two we're going to continue to be working with the state on to try to gain compliance. And it's, unfortunately, it's a situation that most cities are dealing with right now. But we wanted to get the easy fixes, adopted, so that we're just kind of focusing on the bigger issues and, how we can comply with the statutes. So the addendum addresses a few things. We added additional information about the feasibility of achieving the 30 units an acre within a 2-story height limit. We had to, instead of say, explore or encourage or investigate or some verb like that, we had to have an actual commitment to amend the zoning code to permit community care facilities with 7 or more occupants in residential districts. We had an action already in your element about if your accessory dwelling unit production was falling short of your projections, that there would be a commitment to rezone if you had a shortfall in lower income sites. They just wanted a date on there. So we added in, we have to check back with HCD mid-cycle, which is 2025, on your ADU projections, which we have projected 12 ADUs a year. So we check back in 2025. If we're significantly below and you're, looking like you're short, the commitment is to rezone an additional site within 1 year. And then lastly, again, this was already in the element about the city contacting property owners of larger rental properties twice during the planning period to discuss participation in the county's Housing Choice Voucher Program. They just wanted a time frame, so we added a time frame for that. Because Curtis is home sick, but he is on the phone to answer detailed questions. I'm going to cover his part on the safety element and the environmental impact report. We did receive a compliance letter from CAL FIRE, Department of Forestry, on the safety element, so we're good to go there. The safety element objective that has been the topic of discussion has been refined based on council direction 2 weeks ago, and it uses the terminology natural open space to be consistent with how natural open space is defined in the general plan. So the wording as shown there is avoid construction of new development in natural open space areas in very high fire hazard severity zones. And then lastly, the certification of the final SEIR. The EIR was circulated for 49 days between August 3rd and September 21st. The final EIR includes comment letters and responses, revisions to the EIR and a mitigation monitoring program. Of the 30 public comments received, 16 comments were addressed in the SEIR. Just one comment was from a public agency, Caltrans. The remaining letters were from private citizens. Responses were provided to all the comments. In the final SEIR Section 3 revisions, clarifications, and correction to the SEIR. Sorry, that's a mouthful. And then I'll turn it back to Claire.
Thank you, Karen. So with that, staff is recommending that the City Council adopt the 6th cycle housing element update, including the General Plan Amendment 21-03, include updates to the land use, safety, and circulation elements, and certify the final subsequent environmental impact report, and direct staff to continue to develop the zoning ordinance and the zone change for the residential high density and the religious overlay zone sites. That concludes my presentation, and we're available to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Senior Planner Lynn and Consultant Warner, for that presentation. Just out of curiosity, my question is, if we had approved this 2 weeks ago and your meeting with HCD had just was conducted yesterday, how would have those changes been incorporated into the housing element? Would it have to had come back to council with those amendments?
So if we receive a letter from the HCD, it will be a letter with findings, and we will have to address those and then provide City Council an amended housing element.
Okay, it's helpful to know. Okay. The Attorney Gregosian.
If I could also add, Mayor, state law only requires us to consider written comments submitted by HCD. The comments provided by HCD were oral comments, but we assume that these oral comments are going to make it in written form. We just haven't received their written comments yet. They've missed their deadline.
Okay, so that it still would have come back to council.
Right.
I see. Thank you for that clarification. Councilmember Creeps.
Just a follow-up on that, because it sounds like there's a possibility or even a likelihood that the written response is going to go beyond what was able to be addressed in the tight turnaround between the meeting and today. So I mean, I suppose the process that we're talking about here is something that we should probably anticipate based on the formal feedback that we're expecting beyond just the few things that were in this addendum.
Yeah. So you will have findings based on, as I said, the requirement for additional information on the fair housing and the additional information to justify your sites. We rescinded the element that we provided to them, round 2 element, where the letter was due next Tuesday. Because you're adopting it and we hopefully will be making these changes. They will then be reviewing the adopted element during that time frame, and they have 90 days to prepare written findings on the adopted element. we will be working closely with them to try to, address these issues with the sites and the fair housing.
How does that play into the 120-day extension? I mean, if the period is ended and we have yet to receive their comments, is that sort of a extra grace period, or is there sort of delay then also going to impact our ability to meet the 120-day extra day grace period?
So that's February 12th is the grace period, and if we're still not, if you adopt tonight, you'll have adopted within that grace period. The other bar is that you adopt a compliant element with that grace period. So if we're not able to gain compliance within that grace period, then you fall within the 1-year deadline for doing your rezoning, which is October 15th, 2022. You will be working on the rezoning, and that's going on now, in fact. So I don't see that being a huge issue. Okay, Councilmember Garcia?
So I'm looking at some of these oral amendments that we're being concerned with, and one of them really concerns me. So we're thinking about ADU production, and that we have to come back within 1 year if production and affordability levels are low. So why are ADUs different relative to, let's say, Site 3 that was multifamily? Let's say that never happens. From my understanding, they're not going to come back and say, well, that didn't happen, now you have to rezone somewhere else.
You're right.
Why is ADU different?
ADUs are different.
Okay.
They're in their own category. Because ADUs are based on a rate. And so we do the best we can based on your past production and then the additional incentives we're providing to produce ADUs, and then, initiating another amnesty program to project that a realistic rate. But, obviously you want to be a little bit aggressive because it's really helpful in addressing your lower income needs. So this is something that HCD is requiring for any city that's not just going based on the exact level of production over the past 3 years, and we're bumping it up a little bit. So they have this check back requirement. If you're a little bit low, you're not going to need to rezone because you have a little bit of a cushion. But if it's preventing you from meeting, if you don't have enough cushion, then you would need to identify another site.
So just to clarify, rezoning, they won't come back and ask about production, but since we're using ADUs as some of our arena numbers, that falls under a benchmark of production.
Right, exactly.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Councilmember Parkhurst?
Can you tell me a little bit more about the page 316 and adding 2 facilities with a capacity for 46 individuals? Kind of what was the driver for adding that in, and how does that impact zoning in the city?
That was just to, we had the description actually in a paragraph below that about your community care facilities currently in the city that are 7 or more. And they said, well, you had indicated that the city has a track record, tell us what that is. So we added it to both paragraphs. So that was just simply reiterating the fact that you do have several larger community care facilities in town.
That they're existing.
Yes.
And they just wanted more information about that.
Right,
Okay.
right.
Okay. Any other questions before we open up the public hearing? Okay, seeing none, thank you. So now we will open up the public hearing. If you would like to comment on this item, either if you can complete a card, it makes it a little easier for documentation purposes. If you can do that, and I know we also received some emails. Madam City Clerk?
Madam Mayor, the first speaker is Nancy Beckham.
Good evening again. One of the things that I
Ms.
have
Beckham,
been...
can you get closer so
Yep,
when it's
I
recorded?
can.
Thank you.
I can. One of the things that has bothered me about the safety element comes back to Carter again and again. And one of the things that was told to me by Bob Spears was that when he was working up at Bailey Canyon with several of the students from LaSalle High School, the people came to clean out the debris basin, and he watched very carefully and realized that when that gate was open and they were in doing what they did, even fire trucks couldn't get by the people and the large machinery that came to clean out the debris basin. It bothered him a great deal, and we were chatting about it in the parking lot after the planning commission because he was trying to come up with other possible ways to avoid Carter completely. He did come up with some other thoughts, but he was felt the same way that I have because of the width of the street, and there's nowhere to get any more width for that street because the county won't sell parts of Bailey Canyon. I spoke to you last week about what Carter looks like. I blew this up because we thought we could use it for other reasons, but mostly it's because of the 12% grade coming down from the Monastery property and then going through that 20-foot wide gate here that would put the people on a 20-foot wide piece of land that's paved. And you're going from 46 at the top of the hill down to 44 feet and then a 9-degree turn into that Carter gate. I don't know how you can do anything up there at all because if you now have, which is the flood control gate right here, if you're now dealing with that, and from what Bob said, you couldn't even get onto Carter because of the equipment cleaning out the debris gates, and I don't know what you're going to do even trying to get the fire trucks in and out. Because they use this gate to get up to the monastery to put out the fires. So it's of great concern to me, and although it doesn't abut apparently wide open space, the Monastery Meadows area is still considered a severe fire hazard. And I think I'm correct, but I may be wrong, that you were not going to allow any development in a severe fire hazard area. So I'm just throwing that back at you, because I think that's what was decided not so long ago. And I think after the Bobcat fire, it was discussed again, and once again, they said the same thing. So I'm just asking stupid questions, which really aren't very stupid. But I am very concerned about the severe fire hazard. And it doesn't help that now our governor has told us the same thing, that California, once again, is now in year 3 of a very severe drought. So it doesn't make a lot of sense to even consider doing a housing development like the one they're talking about up at the Meadows. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ms. Beckham, that,
yeah.
Well, I mean, we got that information, and that's much easier to read, by the way.
Well, I had it, but I couldn't carry it because I had to park from here to there last week because people were coming to meet Senator Portantino. So I couldn't carry it because I had too far to walk.
Understood. So as
I think this helps.
So as we're considering mitigation measures for the monastery, that's definitely something we can take into account. But in the housing element itself, that's not part of it. But it's helpful as we're looking at the mitigation piece and then as you're commenting on the safety and the open space.
It is and it isn't, because if you okay this stuff and this stuff is part of the SEIR, you're indicating that it's okay with you that this goes forward with the monastery.
So it's it's not an argument piece, but it is separate, and so we will take that into account again as we're looking at the mitigation measures.
Sure.
But again, and I hear your comment about the safety and the fire hazard, so thank you.
Thank you very much.
This is going to be all. Okay, next.
Madam Mayor, the next speaker is Susan Newhausen.
Good evening, and first, thank you for updating the SEIR so it had all the meeting parts. So you all know this, but I then went and looked at that and then went back and looked at the SEIR, the draft, and on page 415 it says the general plan creates a framework for future development within the city. For the purposes of SECA analysis, Table 1 summarizes the potential residential zoning. And so, you know, again, if you go there, that includes zoning revisions to 10 sites within the city, which then includes Stonegate and the Meadows. And so that's why some of the comments that were received. And so, as you know, the state SECA guidelines require that the lead agency evaluate comments on environmental issues received from persons who reviewed the draft SEIR and prepare a written response to comments received during the notice comment period. So, as was already said, only 16 comments were there, and so you would actually think that that would allow for detailed responses to comments. However, I went and looked, you know, because that was the missing section before, and one example is Tricia Searcy's letter. She actually raised 6 points, very detailed, 6 pages of remarks. You know, one page was just about the project description. It wasn't clear. She asked about all different projects relating to it, projects unstable, considering that it included the Meadows, but then it's not. Project description is not complete or finite. And details, I mean, it's 6 pages of actually asking questions and details things of what doesn't seem to be there. You then go to the response, which is 1 page, and most of that 1 page is actually trying to do a brief synopsis of what she said. So basically, in response to her first comment, it was see Master Response 1, Scope of Environmental Analysis. Additionally, see the 1 Carter Avenue project and the Meadows at Bailey Canyon. And so that's what, you know, that's what it is. It's so undetailed. You know, I review grants, I review papers, I'm a scientist, I submit grants and papers. You get comments back, and you need to address them in detail as well as then refer to where somebody should look to see more detail. This is missing. So I thought, okay, I'll go look at the Master Response 1. Maybe that gives enough detail to address all the concerns that were raised. It didn't. It's, again, something that's extraordinarily general. And then it also, again, refers to these other projects. So at a minimum, it would seem that for the general plan for the SEIR, you should have these attachments attached, but they're not. And then the last comment I want to make is, it seems to me, if I can find my piece of paper, hold on. Anyways, it seems to me that the city really has not met the criteria for responding to this. There are a lot of questions that have been raised that have not been addressed, and it seems to me that it's really premature to be doing this. Basically, new information requiring recirculation includes draft DRR was fundamentally and basically inadequate. And considering all the questions that have not been answered, to me it meets that criteria, and it's really not quite ready for prime time. So thank you.
Thank you. Do you have another comment card, Madam City Clerk?
Madam Mayor, those were the only 2 comment cards. There are 3 emails that were received for public comment.
Okay, so if we don't, if we don't have your comment card and you want to comment on this, please make your way to the front and/or complete a comment.
My comment card is there. Here, but I put them both in the same card.
Okay,
So.
go ahead, come on up,
All
Ms.
right.
Sheridan.
My apologies.
Good evening again. Deb Sheridan. You council members are discussing whether to change the general plan. And I might remind you that I spent 5 long years as a member of the General Plan Update Steering Committee. We had countless hours in meetings, special meetings, town hall forums, producing and reading a survey for our residents and business owners. I am also on the steering committee for Preserve Sierra Madre. As such, we read and attempted to digest the SEIR, the DEIR, and the specific plan for the Meadows. And you have heard how many pages? 4,000 or so. So I am speaking to you as an informed citizen. Tonight, though, I'm speaking to you as a concerned resident only about one part of the general plan that the consultants are attempting to modify. That is to add to the safety part of the general plan, which currently states, avoid expanding development into undeveloped areas in very high fire severity zones, to add HZ 5-.B, avoid construction of newly development on land currently unimproved and abutted by natural open space areas in very high fire severity zones. This addition is totally irrelevant to coming up with our current RENA numbers of 204. I implore you to remove this from the change in the general plan. As I am limited to only 3 minutes, I'm not allowed to continue as to why this is so important. Speaking personally again, I have no problem with a religious overlay zone since the Bethany property and those attendant problems have been removed. And I thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Sheridan.
My apologies, I found it with items not on the agenda.
Okay.
Thank you. Madam Mayor, Scott Oliver.
Thank you. Yes,
Okay.
please. Yes, you're next.
Scott Oliver, on Carter. As I had spoken at the Planning Commission last week about the traffic situation and presentation by the traffic engineers, I found some of or a lot of it, totally inadequate to what I expect as a retired commercial driver to witness, as I sit on my porch on Carter, because even without the homes right now, I see what happens when things happen, weather. As maybe some of you know, Carter is used as a staging street for trash and large truck situations that go on North Auburn and Hermosa. And one of the things I noticed when they were discussing the traffic surveys for the Planning Commission was they only spoke about the intersections. One of the things they don't seem to realize is that if they consider Carter as a egress-ingress route, that when cars are parked as they currently are allowed, you cannot drive 2 cars side by side against each other. And when they spoke about the accumulation at the stop signs exiting the Monastery project, they only talked in really weird general terms, basically said, yeah, it's not going to be great, but it's not going to be bad. What I'm thinking about is if you stack up 5-8 cars at the Auburn stop sign on West Carter going eastbound, and there's just a few parked cars, it's going to prevent eastbound traffic. And my question is, and why isn't this considered, and why aren't these things being considered, is that if this is potential for what could happen every day, how can that be considered a secondary route? Which leads me to think, from my experience, they're just going to eliminate parking. And if that was the case, and if that is the case, why aren't we being told that? Because I think my neighbors, there's some pretty affluent people, not me, but there are many affluent people on Carter. If they all of a sudden knew that anyone that comes to their home will not be allowed to park on the street because we need minimum clearance for just basic traffic. Remember, I'm not talking about emergency. I'm not talking about wildfire. Think about that. Think about what it would be if there was some type of a conflagration. How would people come and go? You take away parking on Carter? You don't think that would devastate that neighborhood?
Mr. Oliver,
And this isn't being discussed.
Thank you very much, but that is not the agenda item, and we're making note of your comment, but that is not the agenda
I
item
thought I
right
was
now.
referring back to the SEIR. I'm sorry,
This
I
is the housing element.
apologize.
No, but noted, thank you for your comment. Do we have any other comments relating to the housing element? Ms. Cersei.
I did do a card, but before my time starts, could I just say that we didn't get the staff report? I heard a staff report mentioned and an addendum
The
or
addendum?
something, and none of that was included on the website.
It's on the website now, but we can make sure that we can get that out to you today.
I just checked on it. a minute ago and it was not there.
Right
We were
before the
here-
meeting, we checked to make sure it was uploaded.
Is it under the
Mr.
agenda?
Gonzalez?
You click under the agenda or the?
It's under the agenda, yeah. And we can get copies out and we'll put out back. Can we get copies out
Okay,
from
'cause I
someone?
did not see that. Okay, well, as I pointed out last time, and Susan also reiterated, the city has not met its legal obligation to respond to the SEIR comments, which is why there's not much to see in the revision section. It also has a legal obligation to assess in this SEIR the environmental impacts of the Stonegate and Meadows projects. These projects have not been included, even though the city acknowledges that to not include them would be an oversight. Yes, it's an egregious oversight, and because the city knows this, it pretends to include them by naming them and saying that they are included while actually not including them. This is not an inconsequential pro forma document that's just something that has to be filed with the state as a matter of course with no real meaning or import. No, this is the future of our city and what's going to become of it in the next 8 years. I strongly urge you to not certify this SEIR because it is a fiction. I can't imagine that the smoke and mirrors in this report would fool anybody who understands what's going on here in Sierra Madre. And I suppose there's a good chance that at the state level, they don't. So if the goal is to trick the state into approving this woefully inadequate document to meet a deadline, maybe you'll get away with it, but then this community will be stuck with the failure to reckon with the potential consequences of what's actually happening here, and that's selling the city down the river. And that's hopefully not how you all see your jobs. It seems like it should be uncontroversial to say that we need to evaluate the environmental impacts of the two largest projects in our history in conjunction with the other developments in the city. That's what this SEIR is supposed to do. Right here and now in this document, the city is obligated to assess the environmental impacts of all projects slated for 2021 to 2029 timeframe together. And the city acknowledges this because it's obvious, but then just doesn't do it. On the one hand, the city says in the SEIR, we are including the Meadows and Stonegate projects because it would be an oversight not to. On the other hand, it says, well, we're not including them for environmental analysis. This is an environmental impact report. The mayor and city staff have recently taken the position in an email to me, which you all have in your possession, that Stonegate and Meadows projects are not in fact included in the SEIR because they don't contribute to RENA numbers. So what? The SEIR is much broader than RENA numbers. It encompasses our general plan, housing, safety, and circulation elements. Both of these projects have significant environmental impacts that affect each of these areas, and those impacts are supposed to be evaluated here in this document, and they are not. Why not? This is the time and place for you to exercise your responsibility and your power, the power granted to you by your constituents, to simply require that this report be done right, which means including environmental analysis of the Meadows and Stonegate projects in conjunction with other development sites in the city, along with providing substantive responses to the comments in the SEIR, which still has not been done. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else that would like to comment?
Alex Arietta. Two comments about the objective HC7 on the fire policy. Again, the original draft of that was avoid expanding development into undeveloped areas and very high fire severity zones. That's what the consultant initially wrote, right? Pretty commonsensical, high fire risk. Let's develop a policy that addresses that. And also is consistent with the general plan. But what happens? After that is discussed, after that is presented, the Planning Commission, it's changed. It's changed by city staff to, and I don't care how it's, city attorney actually made a comment around confusion on it and needed to bring clarity, but also to address questions the residents had about what the impact is on the Metals project. Now the reality is everyone can see right through that and understand that the policy was specifically changed to address the Metals project, right? In terms of the verbiage. And that's easy to see, it's visible. So I'm very concerned about that. Secondly, Before certifying this SEIR, the city needs to ask the city attorney for his legal opinion that the mitigation required in the SER for any new development can be legally deferred under CEQA. That's a question. That's a question for the city council to ask the city attorney whether that is required and what's the legal opinion on that. Not just for city council's benefit, but for the residents. Not sure if you're going to answer that or not.
You can continue with your.
Before the council certifies the SER, council should provide a legal opinion that if the failure to include the required mitigation in the city's mitigation plan were challenged in court, the certification of the SEIR and approval of the general plan, including the housing element, would not be overturned. And if the city's certification of the SER were overturned, what would the effect have on the housing element? These are substantive questions which the city council needs to push on the city attorney to ask and to be answered candidly and directly, and also for the benefit of the residents here. This SER in its current form, not just because of how the obvious changes were made to the fire policy, but also because of the issues around the mitigations that are not being addressed in this plan, and what the potential fallout can be to the city as a result of that. Those questions, which are important legal questions, have not been answered. But I implore this committee to not approve the SEIR in its current form. Don't put a development above the safety of the residents of this city with that change fire policy. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to comment on the housing element of this item on the agenda? Okay, seeing none, we'll bring it back to council. Oh, sorry. Madam City Clerk, if you can share the public comment items that were sent via email, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. First email received was from Shelby Moser, and the email states that she's not able to attend the meeting, but is opposed to the approval of the current SEIR for reasons previously stated. And she says, I have yet to be convinced this housing project isn't too big for our small city, as well as for the times we're living in the climate change and drought. The second email, and both emails were forwarded to the City Council previously for review and consideration. The second email is sent by Barbara Valturo, and Ms. Valturo has a number of legal questions that she would like answered before the certification of the SEIR. The SEIR to amend the general plan, including the housing element, safety element, and circulation element, is recommended to be certified by the City Council on Tuesday, November 9th. It is important that the Council clarify with the City Attorney legal questions that might potentially cause the certification of the SEIR to be overturned. The transportation section of the SEIR required very specific mitigations before any of the sites, including the Meadows and Stonegate, with the exception of St. Rita's, which was still included at the time, would be acceptable under CEQA. Accordingly, the city has committed to enact all feasible mitigations, however, has not done so as clarified below. And there are a number of questions that Ms. Vilturo poses in the next 3 pages of the email. Would you like me to go through that?
Thank you. I think we received all of it.
Yes, ma'am, you did.
Okay. So I know we have Mr. Zacuto on the line. Curtis, are you on the line?
Yes, I am. I'm here.
Hi, sorry. A quick question from Rachel Arizmendi is, can you give the background again about CAL FIRE and the language about the fire hazard space and why that was added, please?
Sure. So CAL FIRE has specific information that they're looking for in the safety element, and what they're looking for is policies that would address, the very high fire hazard severity zones, as an example. And we originally wrote the first policy addressing that, and as was articulated previously, that there seemed to be, we had written the policy to address the very high fire severity zones in the undeveloped areas of the city, in the hillside areas. And but then it became clear that there was other ideas about what people had thought that policy or objective was addressing, and we then rewrote the objective and brought that to the Planning Commission, and the Planning Commission didn't like what was rewritten, and they addressed rewriting the objective, which was then brought forward to you, the City Council, and then that again was rewritten. And the way it was rewritten was to as it stands now, is avoid construction of new development in natural open space areas in very high fire severity zones. And the natural open space areas was added back into, from what we had rewritten at Planning Commission, was put back in because natural open space areas are defined in the general plan. And back to the original objective, avoid expanding development into undeveloped areas in very high fire severity zones. It was basically undeveloped areas is not defined in the general plan. So the idea was to go back and rewrite this so that we are defining what is putting wording into the objective that's been defined in the general plan. So that's how it ended up being avoid construction of new development in natural open space areas in very high fire severity zones.
Well, two parts is I do understand now that CAL FIRE has approved, or we are in compliance with their requirement. Is that correct?
That's correct. And we had submitted to them the changes to the objective.
Okay, and I just lost my second part of my question, sorry. So I will, if it comes back. Are there any questions either with Mr. Zacuto or anything else?
Just along those lines, Madam Mayor. Yeah, so I'm looking at our general plan, and we have residents here that were part of that process and alluding to that they spoke on that issue. And I'm looking at objective HC5.B, and that doesn't exist in our existing general plan. So this is, I want to confirm that this is new language and not old language or an update on an old issue within the general plan. This is completely new language, correct?
Yes, that's correct. So we created the original objective, avoid expanding development into undeveloped areas in very high fire severity zones. We created that objective. It was not in the original general plan.
So we're not changing something that's in the existing general plan by including this objective. We're actually including a new objective.
That's correct. This is a brand new objective.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor?
And that was because it was a requirement as part of the safety plan through this SEIR, correct?
Correct. It was something that CAL FIRE is specifically looking for to address the very high fire hazard severity zone.
Thank you. Councilmember Parkhurst?
So following up on that, so we don't have anything in the very high fire severity zone. So because all of the properties that we're looking at for the RENA numbers are outside that zone, how did this get triggered? It got triggered because of the safety element, and if it got triggered because of the safety element, why did the safety element get triggered? I'm trying to follow how we get to very high fire severity zones when none of the properties are in that area.
Sure, I can explain. The housing element looks at the RENA numbers and the development sites that were presented in the housing element, the original housing element that we analyzed when the notice of preparation was prepared back in April. At that time, there were 8 potential sites, and I understand 2 of those sites, the church sites have dropped off. However, we analyzed 8 sites. And then to make the general plan internally consistent by law, we have to go back and update the land use element. And that's what we have done because the land use, to address these RENA numbers, the land use element is proposing 2 new land use categories and an overlay, and the zoning implements the general plan, and so there's 2 new zones and an overlay zone in addition to that that's being proposed. Those 2 things are separate. The law, the state law had required that the next time the housing element is, your housing element is updated, you need to go back in and update your safety element. And so that's why the safety element is being updated. And essentially what the law is requiring, that you had a hazard mitigation plan that was prepared over a year ago. And essentially what they want is to have that put into your safety element, to kind of merge the 2 together, so to speak. So the safety element is entirely separate from what's going on with the housing element and the RENA numbers.
And it's triggered because if you updating your housing element, you have to update the safety element, and it's part of the safety element.
Correct.
Thank you. Okay.
Do you have any other questions for Mr. Zacuto, or any other questions for Ms. Warner or Ms. Lynn?
Madam Mayor, I had a question for Ms. Warner. Ms. Warner, can you tell us how many other housing elements you've worked on for our city and for other cities?
Well, in this current 6th cycle, I'm working on 7 elements, but I've been doing this for over 30 years, and I've prepared over 100 elements.
Have you ever had any of those overturned?
You mean not approved by the state?
Yes.
Very few. But it's harder this time. The 6th cycle the bar is high, but we're getting there.
Thank you.
City Attorney Garagosian, I have a question for you. Can you talk a little bit about mitigation measures with relation to the CIR, please?
Mayor, I think Senior Planner Lynn can better answer that question.
The ball is tossed to you, Ms. Lynn.
So our EIR consultant has stated in the environmental impact report that there are mitigation monitoring programs that is suggested. And the reason a lot of mitigation measures are the environmental impact for the sites that we included for the RENA numbers are less than significant, and those environmental impact does not have more adverse environmental impact than what was adopted back in the 2015 EIR. So this subsequent environmental impact report is subsequent to the 2015 environmental impact report for the general plan update.
And so what you're referring to is the mitigation measures and how it's monitored?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions with respect to that? Or anything else? Okay. Okay, thank you. All right, so we're back at discussion on this item if we don't have any other comments or questions following that.
Madam Mayor.
Mr. Garcia.
Yeah, so I think it's important, Councilmember Parker's follow-up question, because I agree with Mr. Arrieta saying, if this language is here just to pass through a project up at the monastery, I have a big problem with that. But it seems as though I'm sufficiently satisfied that the reasoning for this update on the high fire zone mitigation efforts, why that has to be in there, because it got triggered by an amendment to the general plan, which is the housing element. So that's my comment.
And we are CAL FIRE compliant.
Right.
So isn't that the main safety concern we have?
Any other comments? Okay. As a few things that I have in mind is I guess I'm not sure why people are not liking the avoid construction of new development in natural open spaces. To me, that is something we want to do, is we don't want to construct new development in natural open spaces in very high hazard severity zones. And so that makes sense, I think, not just because of CAL FIRE and the requirement to review that, but I don't think we would want to, considering the wildfire situation that we have, especially in our city. I also disagree with the premise and the narrative that Stonegate and Meadows should be included in this. It's included as a reference to what the potential developments are. Nevertheless, the housing element as itself as a standalone, the Meadows will have its own EIR, which it already does. And so that is something that will be considered as a standalone. We'll be evaluating that. There will be comments on that. And there will be, we have not started the full period yet. This is going to be, there are many, many steps that are involved into that. So I disagree with that. The Planning Commission has already approved and recommended this as is. I know there's been a lot of questions about how the Planning Commission has commented on this, but this is something they've already approved. And this is something that they recommended for City Council to also approve. And this was also 2 weeks ago. New information has come since 2 weeks ago. I'm glad that we're able to incorporate HCD's comments into this. Nevertheless, it sounds like we're still going to get written comments, and we're still going to have to review that once it comes forward. And to me, most of the emails I get, it seems like there's a mix-up, there's a confluence of the two housing elements, whether it's the SEIR for what we're considering now and the housing element. We are looking at RHNA numbers. That is truly what this element is for. And there seems obviously disagreement in that, but that is what we have done every 8 years. This is something we're doing 8 years now. It happens to be, timing is not great. There is the perception that there is something that we planned it this way. The timing happened as the timing happened. And so now we will have to evaluate the Meadows EIR, and we're going to have to go through that process. But the housing element, the way that I see it, the way that it's presented is very straightforward. If anything, the concerns were more on the downzoning. We were able to address those issues, and I'm looking forward to amending the general plan as it relates to that. The housing, the construction in the no fire area is something we're required to do through CAL FIRE when we are making the housing element, and it's very straightforward. So in my opinion, I have no problem approving this tonight as presented.
Well, may I comment?
Please, Mayor.
I completely agree with you in terms of what you say about the perception, and I do believe that there are misperceptions. And I do agree that the whole Monastery project it's in the future, it's coming. We'll deal with it when it gets here. But it's not in front of us tonight. The housing plan is in front of us tonight. And so I just want to be very clear about this. We pay a tremendous price as a city. We have fiduciary responsibilities. If we don't get this done, it's going to be a tax on our citizens. We have a responsibility to move forward as long as we've done our due diligence. And I believe we have. I just will have to disagree with people who are taking the opposite position. Having been on this council for 7 years and 7 months, I can tell you that our staff has gone the extra mile every step of the way. And I have complete, utter confidence in what they're presenting tonight. And I think the fact that the Planning Commission has given this its full approval, fully conscious of all the issues that are in play here, is an additional testament to that. So I intend to support it, and I hope that we can move past this and we can look at these other kinds of related issues with an open mind and with our due diligence accordingly.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Yeah, I provided my comments 2 weeks ago and still, feel the same way as I did then. Having followed this for 11 months now while on council and several months before then when it came up before council, as well as seeing it through the Planning Commission. I think that we're doing what we need to do to comply with state law to meet our RHNA numbers.
Thank Any other comments? Okay. Do we have a motion one way or the other for this item?
I move to approve.
Okay, and Mayor Pro Tem, is this approval to incorporate also with the addendum?
Yes.
As presented. Okay, we have a first. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Do we have further discussion on this item? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, seeing none opposed, the motion carries unanimously. And Resolution 21-59, approving General Plan Amendment 21-03, and also the adopting of the housing element land use categories has passed. Thank you. All right. Okay. The next item on it, thank you, we don't need any comments from. And the housing. The next item on the agenda is the consideration of City Council Resolution 21-64, approving acceptance of Sierra Madre Fire Department Fire Hazard and Fuel Reduction Grants Fund. Chief Bartlett, I believe you're going to be presenting on this.
Happy the residents are involved in all of city business.
Actually, Madam Mayor and City Council, I'm going to have to pass this over to Natalia Flores, our administrative assistant. She's taken the lead on this grant, done all the legwork for it, and so I don't want to steal any thunder from her. I'm going to let her do the presentation.
Chief.
We'll be here for any questions.
Ms. Flores.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and honorable members of the council. My name is Natalia Flores, and I'm the administrative assistant for the fire department. It is my pleasure to present the fire department's proposed fire hazard and fuel reduction program. In October, the fire department received notice from the state of California that our grant proposal was approved for funding by the California Department of Forestry and Fire Protection, also known as CAL FIRE, through funds made available by California Climate Investments. The total grant award received was in the amount of $78,562. These grant funds are to be used over the span of 2 years, totaling to $39,281 per year. Through the California Climate Investments Fire Prevention Grant Program, CAL FIRE seeks to fund local projects and activities that address the risk of wildfires, reduce wildfire potential, and increase community resiliency. It was a very competitive selection process, and we are very excited that our program was one of the projects selected for funding. We have seen a significant increase in the size and intensity of wildfires in California over the last 20 years, with 15 of the 20 largest wildfires in California history occurring just in the last 20 years. In 2001, as part of the National Fire Plan, the Office of the State of Fire Marshal classified Sierra Madre as a high-risk community, with a portion of the city located in the very high fire hazard severity zone. That zone, as you can see on the map, encompasses everything above Grandview. The fire department's proposed fire hazard and fuel reduction program will allow us to take a proactive and preventative approach to address this issue, ensuring that our community is ready when the next wildfire emergency occurs, which of course we hope never happens. The program's goal is to create a knowledgeable and fire-adapted community through education and community initiatives. To start the program, the department will organize 4 wildfire educational forums and educational workshops on the preventative measures residents can take to protect their homes and community. These events will increase the community's knowledge and awareness of the risks that wildfires pose to the city of Sierra Madre. The 4 educational forums will be held every 2 weeks throughout the months of February and March, prior to any green waste and chipper events. This will allow us to provide the public with information on proper brush management and proper hazard mitigation strategies. Following those forums, the department will organize 4 annual chipper and green waste days. These events will provide the community with opportunities to create a defensible space between their homes and the threatening native landscape. We will be asking residents to register for one of the 4 chipper and green waste days. Residents will then be able to conduct their brush management on their own homes, and at the end of the event, we will bring a chipper truck curbside to all registered homes to remove the vegetation and green waste that residents have left stacked and ready for pickup. Residents will then have the option of keeping those chipped materials as mulch, or with the assistance of Public Works Department, we will haul the chippings and green waste to a designated location where it will be collected by Athens, who will be able to recycle the green waste and woody biomass through composting, mulching, and anaerobic digestion. This initiative will result in improved vegetation health, reduced fuel loading, and reduced greenhouse gas emissions. Dates for these chipper and green waste dates will begin on the last weekend of April and continue through the month of May during Wildfire Preparedness Week and Wildfire Community Preparedness Day. The program will conclude with the fire department's annual Fire Prevention Festival. Next year in 2022, we will be celebrating our 35th year of hosting this festival, and a little fun fact is that Captain Snyder has attended all 34 festivals to date.
Of course he has.
The festival will continue to partner with local agencies such as the Sierra Madre Police Department, Sierra Madre Search and Rescue, California Fish and Wildlife, and many more. Participating agencies will provide our community members with educational materials and information for fire prevention, preparedness, and community safety. The annual Fire Prevention Festival will take place in October during the National Fire Prevention Week. We anticipate that the initiatives presented by this program will result in vested residents who will have a continuing interest in protecting not only the homes, but our entire community of Sierra Madre. Most importantly, we want this program to have a lasting positive impact, and believe that these initiatives are just the beginning of what we have planned for this program. Our goal is to continue expanding this prevention program and to seek for additional ways to provide our residents with home hardening opportunities and funding. We all know that Sierra Madre is well known for its volunteerism and community spirit of neighbors helping neighbors. With this spirit and support of our residents and the City Council, we are confident that the Sierra Madre Fire Department's fire hazard and fuel reduction program will be meaningful, impactful, and a huge success. And that concludes my presentation, and we would be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Nice job, Ms. Flores, on your first presentation to
Thank
City
you.
Council. And what a fun item to present on. Do you have any questions?
Madam Mayor.
Councilmember Creeps?
So the grant amount is to cover both actual out-of-pocket expenses, like I assume the chipper and things like that, as well as covering staff time, or is it just for out-of-pocket costs?
It will cover staff time for anything that's related to the grant funding projects.
Madam Mayor?
Councilmember Garcia?
Are there any funds available or projected to be available, let's say for a resident that's infirmed and they can't actively, get some of the waste on the street themselves? So is this up to the resident to, in totality, to do on their own, or is there some funds available for those that can't do this on their own?
For this grant, there aren't funds available for that, but we have definitely, Chief Bartlett and I continue to kind of just think of ideas, and we know that if we include some of the volunteer groups that we have in town, that they would be able to assist with those residents who may need that.
Great idea, thank you.
Actually, to elaborate on that a little bit, we have made the discussions in these forums that we're going to be doing, gathering basically our partners in the community, especially the volunteers. We find that there will be opportunities perhaps for our CERT members, for some of the civic clubs or what have you that are looking for opportunities to volunteer. That's what we're going to do is address those needs, and if they arise, we're going to see how we can answer that. So
Great.
Fantastic, thank you.
Let's throw in Service Club too for Sierra Madre Middle School.
Have the same thing.
Any other questions, Councilmember Parkhurst?
So are you planning to do any, or how are you planning to do the outreach and targeting to get the maximum benefit out of this? Are you gonna look for highest risk areas? How are you trying to target the audience to get the biggest impact out of this grant?
So the way some of the ideas that we have to encourage, residents to participate in the program, to attend these educational forums is, we will be, one, promoting it in any way through social media, the newspaper, but also with the CSO officer, we are going to be attending neighborhood watch meetings so that the individuals from the neighborhood watch meetings could assist in spreading the word of the program. And that's just one of the ideas, but we're open to any other suggestions.
Okay, any other questions before we open it up for public comment? Okay, thank you, Ms. Flores.
Thank you.
Would anyone like to comment on this item? Seeing none, we'll bring it back for discussion, and it looks like we are looking to approve the adoption of Resolution 21-64. Unless there's further.
I move to approve.
Great. Second?
Can I, before we do, just a quick, so I'd like to give kudos to Ms. Flores on this. This is a big concern of mine on two fronts, on the greenhouse gas front and on the fire front. And considering the concerns that were just recently raised or have been raised around high fire around here, kudos to you for getting this and going out and doing it. I know for a fact how competitive these grant situations are. I know the staff that work on this at the Air Resources Board, so thank you for doing this, for stepping up, and for getting the money for this critical issue for our city.
Is that followed by a second, Mr. Parkhurst?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Do we have any further discussion on this item? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
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 All right, great. Motion carries unanimously. Congratulations.
We'd like to thank you very much for that support, and yes, and Councilmember Parkhurst, thank you so much for giving those accolades to Natalia. She worked really hard on this, and she's got quite a few more on her plate that we're hoping to bring forward in the near
Great.
future.
We
So
look forward to it.
thank you.
We would like to hear back from Ms. Flores as to the status update after the project is done, so look
Absolutely.
forward to hearing from her.
Absolutely. That's going to be part of the fun part is the management component of it. So thank you.
Thank you, and congratulations. Next item on the agenda for discussion is the consideration of change order for Sierra Madre, considering our solar project. Analyst Carlson.
Yes, good evening, Mayor and members of City Council. Discussion item number 2 this evening is the consideration of a change order for the Sierra Madre Solar Photovoltaic Project. Staff is recommending that the City Council direct City Manager Reynoso to sign the second amendment to the solar power agreement, which would incorporate the $300,000 change order into the lease and allow for the issuance of construction permits. The change order consists of a number of items that the city required the contractor to accomplish above and beyond the original agreement. This included site preparation, attaining a conditional use permit and environmental studies to support the CUP, permitting, minor design adjustments, and the increased costs incurred by the contractor due to the 12-month delay of completing the CUP. And that was much in the form of increased material and labor costs. The solar project was approved with the caveat that there would be no upfront cost to the city. To maintain that commitment, staff asked that the contractor to incorporate the change order into the lease terms. A new pro forma, otherwise known as an investment model, was provided to staff, which included the change order as well as the updated energy savings based on the current actual energy rates. To the delight of staff, the annual cost savings actually increased by approximately 42%. And that demonstrated the project is actually more valuable than originally estimated. This project will offset approximately 38% of the energy used to distribute the city's water. And that's going to be done with locally produced clean solar power. It'll eliminate 693 tons of CO2 per per year. Staff is therefore recommending that the City Council direct City Manager Reynoso to sign the second amendment. This will also allow us to issue the permits tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you, Analyst Carlson. Do we have any questions? For Parkhurst.
So, Analyst Carlson, so Commissioner Spears, when this came before Planning Commission, said, why the heck do we have to do an EIR on this? Sounds like we're going above and beyond on it. I mean, being an environmental professional, I always want to make sure we're considering the environmental impacts. But even the developer on this said, we don't normally do something on this one. Can you explain to us why we're doing an EIR for a project this size?
Yeah, well, we looked at our code requiring CUPs, and it went back to 1978. And it was a little back and forth on if it should. It did say a utility project or a utility service. We played it prudent, and we did the CUP with the CEQA study. And I think we should be doing that, and it's better to do it and maybe not need it than not have done it and get in trouble.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Madam Mayor?
Councilor Creeps?
So I mean, it's very exciting that the value of the project has gone up, although I guess that's at the expense of all of us who are paying increased utility rates, I suppose. So
There was a considerable recent rate increase, yes.
So when we project out the savings, it's based largely on current pricing, and recognizing that the utility pricing market is pretty volatile. Do we account for that? The fact that it goes up and it rarely goes down, but sometimes it goes down.
Sure.
That we've sort of projected this over some period of the life of this project, not just based on today's prices.
Yeah, it's a pretty industry standard model that's used when we did our RFP. All of the proposals use the same standard model. I can't explain exactly how the models and the formulas work, but the outputs are very consistent, and I would even go so far to say they might even be a little conservative. So I really think this project has increased in value.
Thank you.
So Councilmember Creeps, this is more of a comment than a question, but I did look at the consumer price index for electricity in the Los Angeles area. Yes, and it is volatile. There have been years where it's spiked up 33%, and there's been years where it's gone down 11% over the last 20 years. But looking at a compound annual growth rate through time, we're seeing about 5 3/4% increases on average for electricity in this area. So I think we're pretty confident that prices will continue to go up for electricity. Therefore, I think this project offsets a lot of those costs, and the greenhouse gas, right? Which is good.
Okay, so if there are no other questions, we'll open this up for public comment. Would anyone like to comment on this item? Seeing none, we'll bring it back for discussion. And I'll just say, the change order dollar amount was a little surprising, but when you calculate into the additional savings and projection as to what the savings total could be, and like you said, the environmental impact too, it makes sense. That 300,000 is a little hard to look at, but as you're looking at the pro forma and the overall impact, I think it makes sense.
Can I comment real quick? Yogi Berra said it feels like deja vu all over again, but I feel like when we went and passed this and made the original decision here, there were so many good things about it. It was all good, and to have this come back and be so cost effective and to be even more lucrative is just an amazing thing. I don't think we've ever seen that since I've been in city government, where we're actually making more money than we anticipated. So it's fantastic. Just happy to vote for it.
Great. Madam Mayor.
Yeah, Councilmember Creeps.
I mean, just to follow on that. I mean, look, I'd rather also have the benefit of not spending an extra factoring in an extra $300,000 of costs into and enjoy that savings as well. But I think on balance, given the value of this contract, I don't think that the sticker shock on the change order should prevent us from continuing the project. And so that was sort of where I came down in terms of evaluating, you know, if these were necessary changes, and I think overall it's a very good project and it's going to be very beneficial for the city for a long time, then that was sort of my calculus in considering this.
Any other comments?
Correct me if I'm wrong, City Manager Reynoso, but a lot of this was a function of something that we were planning on doing with our own public works, and then we have then decided to have the contractor do the work.
Councilmember Garcia, that is correct. There was a drainage pipe that crossed one of the settling basins. It's going to be backfilled, and that is going to be covered with the change order. And if there's any additional information, Management Analyst Carlson can follow up.
Just, Analyst Carlson, just confirming that a bulk of this cost was something that we planned on doing in-house, but then we decided that's probably not a good idea, right?
Yeah, when we went out to, with the RFP, we imagined our own crews doing a lot of the site preparation, the grading, the contractor to do some of the compaction and some of that stuff. We were approached by a labor union early on, and that's when we said, you know, COVID just started. That is more appropriate to go out and get that subcontracted work done. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments? Or do we have a motion?
Yeah,
Councilmember Parkhurst.
So I mean, it's not surprising, you know, with the challenges in the supply chain that you know, the steel for this may still be on a ship somewhere sitting outside the harbor. Yeah, even though we haven't contracted for it, but I mean, we're having supply issues on there. And to me, you know, this, echoing what other folks have said, it's a good example of the volatility of the natural gas market. At last week's Clean Power Alliance meeting, they were just talking about Edison is raising rates, which we kind of expected to see. I'm glad to see that Councilmember Garcia looked at the overall costs in the future, because I think that's the best way to look at it, because if you try to understand your utility rates, you could drive yourself crazy. They're incredibly complex. And I'm thrilled to see this going forward and the support of others on the council.
Great.
So I'll make a motion.
Thank you, Councilmember Parkhurst. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Member Pro Tem Goss. Further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
See those permits.
Let's do it.
Okay, next item on our agenda is American Rescue Plan Act, discussion of proposed expenditure plan. I believe Finance Director Gorilla Leone will be presenting on this item.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. The City of Sierra Madre was allocated $2.5 million in American Rescue Plan Act funding, also known as ARPA. Treasury provides guidance on eligible categories, and the purpose of these funds is to promote recovery from the pandemic. On September 28, 2021, Council directed staff to bring a proposed expenditure plan for ARPA funding. Taking into consideration the needs of the city and the direction provided by Council, staff is proposing ARPA funding to be allocated within the categories of parks, nonprofit support, water infrastructure improvements, and revenue loss. The proposed amount for parks is $750,000, and this amount would fund the Sierra Vista Park playground replacement. The proposed amount for nonprofits is $200,000, and staff would develop an application process similar to the Small Grants Business Program, determine the need of each applicant, and then award the funds. The proposed amount for water infrastructure improvements is $1 million, and this would help continue the capital improvements for the water. Lastly, the proposed amount for revenue loss is about $631,000, and as of December 2020, we have calculated $500,000 in revenue loss. The recommendation from staff is for City Council to approve input on the proposed ARPA expenditure plan and direct staff to come at a later meeting for a final ARPA expenditure plan. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Finance Director Gorilla Leone. Do you have any questions?
Madam Mayor,
Councilmember Parkhurst.
can you tell me how you came up with the $200,000 for the the nonprofit support. How did you arrive at that number?
So for our small businesses, we did about 180,000, and that was like a grant of about 6,000 per business. So I used that trends, and also we saw about 60 nonprofits within the city. So I just using the trends from our small business grant program. That's what I use. But it's up for discussion on the allocation.
Okay, any other questions? Councilmember Creeps.
Thank you for this. I appreciate that, we've given direction to staff, and I really appreciate that this is in response to the discussions we've already had. Just a quick question on the revenue loss line item. You mentioned that you'd calculated through the end of 2020 a $500,000 revenue loss. I guess the delta between that and the proposed number here is relative to 2021?
So the difference would be for any other revenue loss that we calculate after that, because we can calculate it at 4 different points in time up until 2023. This is the first calculation, so the remaining would be for anything else that we incur.
And I know this is a little off topic because it's the next agenda item, but there I think is interrelation between the two. If this was this revenue loss was recovered through ARPA, would that change the amount of general fund reserves that we're going to be the subject of our next discussion item?
So anything claimed in the revenue loss would go into the general fund for general services. So then at that time, it would affect the general fund for any future expenditures council would like to approve.
So I guess that was sort of a roundabout way of asking if we recover revenue loss as permitted by ARPA, that would perhaps create more room for the revenue surplus projects that we'll be talking about next.
Yes, correct.
Thank you.
Councilmember Garcia?
No question.
Oh.
I'm excited for discussion.
Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, I'd like to open this up for public comment. If you would like to comment on the ARPA or American Rescue Plan Act dollars, please make your way. How did I know it would be you, Mr. Gordon? Come on up.
David Gordon, president of the Sierra Madre Playhouse. I'm very, very encouraged to see the proposed allocation to not-for-profits. I think the Playhouse is probably the largest not-for-profit in the city, and so we'd be particularly anxious that this should be passed, and that the process for allocating the money should bear in mind the relative size and importance of the not-for-profits that are in the city. As you'd expect, I think that the Playhouse is extremely deserving of these funds since we have effectively been closed for 2 years and we're facing tremendous uncertainty. It's not certain that the audiences for small intimate theatre will come back as soon as we need. People have got used during COVID to home entertainment, and this period has coincided with this explosion of streaming services, which means that once you have got your subscription to a streaming service, or 6, the marginal cost of going out, restaurant, tickets. The marginal cost of staying at home and watching your streaming service is 0. So we're worried that there may be a secular trend in entertainment towards greater staying at home. So we are facing an extremely uncertain future, and anything that the city can do to help would be much appreciated. As you all know, we did the Charlie Brown in the Park during the summer, which was an enormous success with the public. Financially, it was crippling, and we are going to have to take a pause in 2022 because we have to figure out a way of making it viable. So we're hoping to work with the city during next year in order to bring something back to the park in 2023. So I do urge the council to accept the staff recommendation for an allocation of a substantial amount to the not-for-profit sector, and to hope that the process for allocating the money can be fairly simple and straightforward, and the sooner the decision is made, the better. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else like to comment on this item? Seeing none, we'll bring this back for discussion. Councilmember Garcia.
Thank you. Yeah, this is exciting stuff, especially given, as Councilmember Krebs alluded to, our next agenda item. So there are things that have to get done in the city that we've been ignoring. A lot of deferred maintenance and a lot of assets that we need to replace. But if you indulge me, I just want to read a little bit from the Department of Treasury. I went and pulled this information. It's not the final rule, but it's the interim final regarding the ARPA funds and use of ARPA funds. And when we look at section 1B, A, B, C, and D, these are the four different buckets of money that can be spent for ARPA. First one, A, is to respond to the public health emergency or its negative economic impacts, including assistance to households, small businesses, and nonprofits, or aid to impacted industries such as tourism, travel, and hospitality. B, to respond to workers performing essential work during the COVID-19 public health emergency by providing premium pay to eligible workers. And it's my understanding this is specific to eligible workers within municipalities. Not totally, but it's part of it. C and D are looking at provisions for the government services to the extent of the reduction in revenue, which we spoke about. And then D, that's C. D is investments in water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure. And obviously this, it's a lot of money, but it won't create broadband infrastructure for our city. So what did I do? I went and looked at other cities and seeing what they're doing with their ARPA funds. And I was interested to see the city of Covina and what they're doing. And they're doing three things. One is cybersecurity and systems upgrade. The other is supporting nonprofits. But I think the third one is important, and it's item B from the Treasury Department. And I think we should seriously consider this, and it's not in the staff report. We rarely get an opportunity to thank our public servants that are working for the city because we don't frankly we don't want to spend general fund monies on that, right? Because that, we can get some residents upset, but this money is specifically earmarked for this issue. So this is, and I think it's a very elegant a way of allocating some funds to fire, police. I mean, let's think about the water and public works that were working their tail off during this pandemic while we're at home and they're out amongst the neighborhood risking themselves on our behalf. And we can go on with city staff in City Hall, go on and on. But here's what it says, what City of Covina is doing. They're doing labor premium pay for essential public employees within the provisions of the ARPA funding for the city that will provide premium pay at all full-time and part-time staff based on the number of hours worked within the 15-month period from, and they give the period. Employees will receive a 5% one-time payout of their base pay for up to 2,080 hours, which is full-time. Or 12 months worked within the designated 15-month period. Leave time, time spent in quarantine, all that other stuff doesn't count. But employees who meet the criteria must also be current city employees to receive the one-time payout to be eligible for premium pay. So Covina is actually obviously bigger than us, but I'm thinking that we could try to maybe carve out some funds for this type of program, maybe with a cap on a per employee basis. But I really think this is like the one time we're able to thank our city employees in this manner, and it's spelled out as the second point from the Department of Treasury. So I just wanted to throw that out there as a consideration.
Any other comments?
Did we do questions? I mean, public comment?
Yes,
Yeah.
we did.
Okay.
Yeah. Any other comments?
Are we tonight trying to divvy this up, or are we just talking in generalities, or what?
You know, I think the good thing is we've got some time. We've got through December 31, 2024, but we did ask to agendize this to give general direction, and given Councilmember Garcia's comment, it's something we can definitely consider. If there's something we would like to take action on tonight, I think we can. If we are still wanting to ask the team to come back with other information, with additional direction, we can do that also.
Okay, well, I'm willing to entertain discussion on what you're proposing and the other things in the list. All the things that were listed, certainly willing to discuss. I'm particularly interested in the nonprofits, and I'm particularly concerned about the Playhouse. I really do believe it's a very unique nonprofit in town, and I would like us to give strong consideration for some kind of significant support for them, just to keep them going, just to keep them, going until maybe they can catch some breaks and the market returns for them in some significant way.
I support the comments of Councilmembers Garcia and Goss on this. I think that you provided some really great background and context for it. That our essential workers have done yeoman service during the last 18 or 15 months, and I think we should include that in that. And I absolutely agree, Mayor Pro Tem, that we should take care of the Playhouse as a part of this.
Mayor, I'm totally in favor of debating, other really important uses of this funding, especially as noted that, it's sort of a one-time thing, and it is, playing with the house's money, to put it that way. One thing I do, though, I'm a little concerned about is the state of the Sierra Vista Park has been pretty deplorable for a while, and I guess I'm suggesting that perhaps in part we could actually direct some of these funds to be used tonight, either in the context of the ARPA funding or in the allocation of the general fund reserve, because I do feel like that is long overdue and is really, sort of a very public-facing detriment to the community. So I really have no sense of what the premium pay, what the magnitude of that is, and so I could be convinced that we need to postpone this to be able to rejigger the numbers based on the magnitude of that, but I really do feel strongly that some of this stuff should actually get approved so that it can get put into process sooner rather than later.
So the good thing is, Sierra Vista Park can be put in either of the pots, so we can definitely consider action on that. I'm willing to take a look at what Councilmember Garcia proposed. This actually came up, I don't know if it was prior to you coming on board. I mean, it was kind of in between. The one thing I would urge us to do is consider all of our staff, because all of our staff stayed on board. None of our staff, we are very thankful that we had to lay anyone off, but I think at that time everyone truly was essential. To identify one category versus another is not something that I want to consider. It would be the staff as a whole. The second item I wanted to share is that the revenue loss piece I think is important. This is the one time that we can access these federal dollars to, not supplement, but to recover the costs that we lost. And so that $631,000 to me is dollars that I think we should earmark for to replace what we had used from our own funds. Nonprofit support I'm fine with. So I'd be in favor, and I guess what would be helpful too is from finance directors, if considering the timing of this, the financial loss to recover, I assume it would have to be within this, where is she? Within this, I was like, I'm looking back there, would have to be within this fiscal year. It may not, but maybe that would be helpful. And it sounds like we have direction to consider calculations for all staff for, is it called a premium pay?
Premium pay,
For premium pay, and to what that might look like, and some of the considerations that Councilmember Garcia brought up, a cap if necessary, 5%. We don't know even what that amounts to, but maybe we can take a look at a range. But with respect to the revenue loss, is that something we need to capture within a certain fiscal period?
No, we can calculate it at December 2020, 2021, so each fiscal year.
We want to make sure it looks pretty so we get another award. So that's not going to be a concern if we make the decision in a year to replace those revenue loss, or whether we make it today.
No, we have to report on our first report in March of 2022 of what we've claimed.
That's for the ARPA, but for our own fiscal, for our own finances and our own books, does that play a role into our financial health?
Oh, okay. So revenue loss, it would be the fiscal year that you're claiming for, yes.
Right, so we would want to take action on that sooner rather than later.
Yes.
Then, of course, we'd report accordingly. Okay. And when would that date be for that revenue, if we wanted to claim revenue loss for the same fiscal year?
So we can, by March of 2022.
Okay, so we have some time. All right. So, you know, what I'm hearing, and maybe what I can propose, and maybe my colleagues can say otherwise, is to come back with some of these directions, with these directives, and then we can look at as a whole, or is Sierra Vista Park we want to take action on, so that, because the RFP process in itself takes quite a while, right? And that might be something we want to initiate. But whether, again, it's from the ARPA dollars or from the general fund dollars, can we at least give directive to start the RFP process? Is that something that we would be comfortable with here? And or is it something that we want to look at all of the other costs associated with both ARPA funding and our reserves before we take action on that?
It seems to me that the decision is, if we think that we are likely to approve this improvement to Sierra Vista Park sort of one way or another, then it seems to me that we could be comfortable in starting the process even before we formally approve the money, because it's going to come out of one pot or another, perhaps. One thing I would say is that, I like the idea of expenditures that qualify, because it is obviously the ARPA has a very limited set of qualified expenses, and so I do like the fact that we have much more latitude in how we use our general fund reserves to make some of these investments. So I do think that to the extent that things are covered by ARPA, we should try to err on the side of putting that in the ARPA bucket, because that will sort of free up a wider variety of things we can consider under the general plan reserve expenditure.
Okay. Any other comments?
I'm comfortable proceeding with the RFP for Sierra Vista Park, whatever bucket it comes out of.
I would like to just go back, I am too. Sierra Vista Park definitely needs an upgrade. Honestly, I looked at that, and $750,000 seems like a little bit much for what they're talking about doing, but I understand everything is expensive. But I am very concerned that we don't, if we're planning to do some kind of support for the Sierra Madre Playhouse, I'd hate to put that off another month. I think we've heard testimony that they're in pretty dire straits now, so I'd kind of like to elevate that maybe to a priority tonight, even if we're not dispersing checks, maybe at least get it up there so we could take action on it fairly soon.
And has staff talked about what the process would look like for the nonprofit support?
So we would do a similar application process that we did for the small business grant program. We have an application in place. We ask them a couple questions and then see their need, and then award it based on the application submitted.
And do we have, I think you've mentioned a maximum for an individual organization can apply for, or no?
No, we didn't determine the maximum.
Could we also carve out a percentage tonight for the Playhouse, and then maybe set the application process for the remaining funds?
Well, it sounds like it would be a competitive application, at least the way that it's presented at this point.
Well, we could choose to subsidize anyone we want as a council. We don't have to wait for an application process.
City man, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Mayor, we received 2 requests for monetary support, one from the Playhouse in an amount of $50,000 and one from the Chamber of Commerce in the amount of $25,000. The direction that we would like to seek from council is to establish the maximum threshold for the award of any grant funding.
And we need to consult the regs, but I think we need to establish objective guidelines for individuals to participate in these, to receive these funds.
Yeah, I forgot they're federal funds.
That was my,
Yeah.
my concern, yeah. Obviously, we want to support the Playhouse, but if we playing favorites with federal money, that could be an issue.
I have a follow-up question on that. I mean, yes, certainly if we're talking about establishing a fund that people are going to apply to, I would understand having parameters that then apply to all applicants. But is it specific in the ARPA funding that the nonprofit support has to happen through a competitive process, or could a city just decide to use some of the ARPA funds to support a specific nonprofit?
That's not clear, Councilmember. We'd have to go confirm with the regulations to see if there are requirements regarding whether there are objective criteria that need to be met.
Okay.
Okay, so it looks like we have direction to identify what the criteria would be, if ARPA dollars are used for nonprofit support. It sounds like we are in agreement that we'd like to at least start the RFP process for Sierra Vista Park, and we'll determine as to which pot of money it will come out of. Well, I shouldn't say most likely linked to ARPA, because it also depends on the third item of direction is to calculate what the premium pay would look like for all staff and what that number looks like, and that will obviously impact the total ARPA allocation dollars, and we'll establish that thereafter. What am I missing? You know, and I have no problem establishing the nonprofit support dollar amount, because we can always allocate a higher amount, but we still need to figure out what those objectives are before issuing out to determine what that process would be as to who would get support. But I mean, I'm open to that too. And then the revenue loss is something that we know an exact number. I'm fine with that coming back later, because we have until March, so we can claim it for this fiscal year. So if we would like, we can ask staff to come back with information as directed and take action, and or if there's something that the council would like to take action on today, I mean, I'm open to that too, but I don't know if we can.
Could we potentially split this into two things and vote tonight on the 200,000 for the businesses and nonprofits and get that started, giving them direction on to set up the criteria for it, and then to come back for the remaining, $2.3 million?
I'm fine with that, but we'll still have to understand what the objectives are. So I see two people. City Attorney Guragosian.
The purpose of the report today was to receive
Direction?
input and direction.
No
If we were
action.
going to approve an actual allocation, that would be through resolution, I think.
Got it.
And then Alex.
Well, there's our answer. City Attorney.
I was going to say that, and also I was going to say that we can also structure it so that it's contingent. So, for example, we can allocate a certain amount of funds to the Playhouse if the objective criteria aren't required under the federal regs, and if objective criteria are required under the federal regs, then we allocate a total sum for which individuals will have to apply for.
Yeah, and I mean, the way that I'm leaning is to give direction and have them come back.
Madam Mayor?
Councilmember Creeps.
Would the timing of this be such that we could consider it at our next and final meeting this year?
What, December?
That means that we would be taking action on a reorganization meeting date.
Which we've done
And
before. But
which
it's
we have
gonna
done
make the
before.
meeting longer.
Yeah. And or, I was like, we could also have a special call meeting for it.
My objective is just to try to get this done before we move into January.
Right.
Yeah, I think we ought to prioritize the process of the nonprofit. That's gonna be priority one, whether it happens in December or January.
So I think we can work towards getting something approved by the end of the year, whether it be at reorganization meeting to take action and or special meeting.
Would we be interested in a contingency motion for the Playhouse tonight in case we can pass muster through the regs?
My preference is to wait for the direction. And especially considering if we're not sure, I mean, this does, for all the nonprofits, I mean, I know we only had two that expressed interest directly, but I know other nonprofits have. And I think in all fairness that we should consider what the objectives are, and then if there is a set aside that we can provide for the Playhouse, that we take it at that time. Okay. So, given that, we obviously have direction, are we okay with either taking action during reorg and or at a special meeting? Are we committed to that?
Yeah.
Special meeting?
Or at reorg?
When?
I'm fine doing it during reorganization, if you are Mayor Pro Tem.
Fine.
And or if we,
That'll work.
yes?
And are we talking just about the nonprofit pot? Or are we talking about
We could
total
we can have a
allocations?
conversation about objectives that we're sending back to staff, right?
Yes.
That they bring back to us on reorg. So objective measurements so I guess maybe my thought is, when we first started talking about this some time ago, I had prioritized nonprofits, not thinking about the Playhouse. I actually mentioned youth sports in town. I really want to see youth sports groups get some of this money, particularly Little League, girls softball, and pony. But I do believe, and I think if you've talked with Mr. Gordon, you realize that the Sierra Madre Playhouse's existence is very tenuous. We may lose it, and I think that's not an exaggeration. So it seems to me that that's not just like a nonprofit. It's sitting there. It's an institution in this city. I mean, it's actually something you drive by every day, and it's part of the fabric of our downtown area. So even though not very many people go to the Playhouse on a regular basis, it is very well frequented during the non-COVID years. I think it's a culturally very valuable thing. So it seems to me the objective criteria ought to be able to carve out kind of a separate criteria for that kind of institution. This is a very different thing than a Little League. Little League can draw revenue from all the people who participate in Little League, right? And then they have a substantial volunteer base. So it just seems like we're talking about apples and oranges when we talk about all the nonprofits and the Playhouse.
Well, I would assume need is one of the, if there
Yeah,
are criteria, I assume demonstrated need was one of them, and it sounded like that was part of the consideration for the small business grants as well. So yes. I would think that would, relative need would be part of the consideration.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
And from what I understand, regarding the rules and regulations, per the Department of Treasury, the need is on a revenue basis. So it's a top line figure if there's a loss of revenue that can be proven, or if it's an expense, it has to be COVID-19 abatement related. So those are two things that have to be considered as well.
Okay. So direction, reorganization, decision, and or if we want to do it earlier, a special meeting that we can consider that. So we good with that?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you, and I think you're presenting on the next item too, Finance Director.
Okay, so for the next report, the intention of the report is to provide an overview of the general fund reserve and an opportunity for council discussion. On June 8th, 2021, council adopted a general fund budget of $10.5 million with a budgeted surplus of 2.2 for 21-22. As part of the mid-year review process, staff will review year-to-date activity and provide council with an updated projections. But based on the budgeted amounts, the general fund is projected to exceed the minimum reserve of 25% of expenditures. Our current reserve policy meets the minimum recommended by Government Finance Officers Association, also known as GFOA. GFOA recommends governments to develop a multi-year capital improvement plan in order to accumulate funding for anticipated capital needs. As part of the 22-23 budget process, staff will work to develop a 5-year capital improvement plan. This plan will be helpful to determine the needs as a city as a whole, and also make sure the timing of the expenditures is also projected. After analyzing the citywide needs over a multiple year period, staff can recommend an amount to start funding future projects. Council has previously expressed interest in identifying community projects that can be funded with the general fund reserves. Although these projects have various timelines and could not feasibly be completed within this fiscal year, Council may direct staff to consider these projects during the budget process and as part of the 5-year improvement plan. And the following projects are the Sierra Vista Dog Park, Sierra Vista Playground Replacement, Wi-Fi at Kirsten Court, library improvements, and Goldberg Park. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Finance Director Guerrero-Leon. Do you have questions?
Madam Mayor?
Councilmember Parkhurst.
So the capital improvement plan, can you give us some ideas of what's included in the capital improvement plan? You've listed a lot of things that are, they're not water. So I'm just trying to understand kind of, are there groups within it? Is water part of it? When you're looking at this capital improvement plan, what are the components that go into it?
So I didn't mention water on these projects because this is for the general fund reserve projects. But a 5-year improvement plan would consider the city as a whole, so water would be included in this plan.
Madam Mayor, just a follow-up. So my understanding would be, it would be looking at all of the city's facilities, you know, City Hall itself, the public safety building, obviously the library is listed here as well, but, you know, obviously all of the capital assets owned by the city and the kinds of deferred maintenance, as Councilmember Garcia mentioned earlier in this meeting, and sort of either addressing the most serious concerns in all of those assets, as well as then setting kind of a more regular replacement and rehabilitation schedule so that we don't get into this deferred maintenance issue going forward. Is that correct?
Yes, correct. The 5-year improvement plan would help us to see the immediate needs and also recurring, like vehicles when we're replacing them, and help us plan, because right now we see a surplus, right? But seeing a 5-year plan, we know what we need to put aside each year.
Thank you.
Follow up on that question. Can we, or is it typical to create a longer term capital improvement plan? I kind of have two linked concerns here. One is what Councilmember Krebs said, is that we've got a lot of deferred maintenance on city buildings and city facilities, and so we definitely need to consider that. But we've also have a history of, or prior council have kicked the can down the road, and we have invested, and I know this isn't about water, but as you're starting to think about the larger plan, what I worry about is we've put a lot of money into our water system right now, and the pipe's 30 years, is that right? A typical life of a pipe?
The pipes that we put in the ground now, we're expected to exceed 75 years.
Good. Okay, that changes my whole thought process. But I don't want to. We've put all this money in now, and then I don't want to, like, all of a sudden cost shift everything 75 years and have a giant slug in the future. So somehow, I'd like us to be starting to think about how we create an ongoing fund so that we can pay for the ongoing maintenance and repair of things, so we don't get into a situation where we've got a 30% loss of water or whatever else the equivalent is in our buildings and any other city infrastructure. So there really isn't a question there, but I apologize. But it's one of the things it's been a concern of mine is how, well, let me ask you this question. How can we do a longer range planning that looks at all of those assets over a much longer time period? Is it possible to do that?
We can start with the 5-year, and then we can work with the water department to see when the timing of the water mains have to be replaced.
Just trying to have some capital that we can start thinking about how to make sure we've got that available. You know, you've done a great job with our finances, but I'd love to be able to think through that so that we don't end up having to have that issue The next generation has that issue.
Can I follow up that? So I think you're thinking globally beyond water, right? All the various deferred maintenance. It seems to me that's has a financial component, but it has a policy component, because when we make budgetary decisions, we routinely make budgetary decisions keeping in mind deferred maintenance. We could just as easily eliminate deferred maintenance as a choice, as a policy matter. You know, when we have a problem with our buildings, we prioritize it. We come up with a plan to pay for it, and we don't let the can get kicked down the road. That's not sexy. That's not something you run for re-election on. That's why we're in the situation we're in. Long-term kinds of considerations like that are very not going to get you re-elected. I've been arguing for this, what you're talking about, for a very long time. It just seems to me, and we have, the water program is doing this very thing, and I give credit to our finance director, our previous city manager, our current city manager. We've done a magnificent job of getting from, you know, flat earth to, you know, heading towards a better position. But I think we have to have some kind of a policy discussion about that. And because it's big. I mean, we're talking about libraries in the mix here tonight.
Right.
I mean, I saw the numbers you put in that report, and I've seen all kinds of numbers over the years on the library. And it seems to me that a big part of that is just simply deferred maintenance. So you throw that money on it now, and then 5 years, 10 years from now, you're going to be right back at the beginning with a roof, you know, holes in it, paint that's not been painted. Look at the top of the library, and you'll see what I'm talking about. So
then maybe this is a whole different conversation.
Mhm.
And I apologize for giving us a
Well, I want that conversation. I'm glad you brought it.
I do too. So maybe it's something that we agendize for a future meeting.
Mhm.
So we want to make sure we still open this up for public comment. So do we have any other questions for Finance Director Carola Leon?
One more. So I see the Wi-Fi at Kirsten Court. Would Wi-Fi at Sierra Vista Park be a similar cost, if you know?
Let's see if I have.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Thumbs up.
I need Oscar.
There are a lot of residents there on the weekends and during the
Don't
week.
we already have Wi-Fi from?
Memorial Park we do.
I thought Sierra Vista don't we piggyback on the Wi-Fi from the yard?
Oh.
We're looking at IT manager Milan.
I don't remember doing that.
I was like, I know Memorial Park.
Wi-Fi at Sierra Vista Park, so.
Mayor and Council, at Sierra Vista Park, we have a very unique opportunity. As I mentioned in the earlier presentation, we now have fiber to the utilities yard. So, so we would potentially save the monthly cost of the internet, since we would piggyback from the access that we already have. But we would still have a little bit of maintenance cost on the licensing of the cloud-based access point. So potentially some of the cost would be saved there. To give you a ballpark, I would say maybe a cost of, let's say, $3,000 a year or so.
But currently we do not have free Wi-Fi at Sierra Madre. Sierra Vista Park.
We do not. That's something that I'm really pushing to get done soon.
Got it. Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, seeing no other questions at this time, we'll open this up for public comment. What does Mr. Alcorn want?
Well,
Where do you want the money to go?
I just want to echo the sentiments expressed here. That I've had a problem for years again about the water system. You know, that it's inexcusable that it's gone this long and there's been a problem for now. So I think that it's inexcusable not to have a longer-term view to do the overall city. So I think that, you know, it probably maybe it's going to take a while to figure that out. But I really think that that's incumbent on everybody here to really, you know, not, as they say, kick the can down, that's a term, but it's inexcusable what's happened right now in our water system. And I don't think that it's incumbent upon some group, and I think you're it, to try and come up with something that makes sense, covers a longer term basis, so that, you know, they don't have a problem like we have now. I just want to just foster that. I really suggest you take it seriously, do that. Now, it doesn't have to be done today, but it really be a serious consideration, and you do that to come up with longer term and implement it. And I just want to say it, because I think you're right on doing that. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to comment on this? Okay, seeing none, we'll bring it back for discussion.
I make a quick
Yeah,
couple,
please.
and I looked at the list, just like the ARPA list, and it's like, it's a kid at a candy store. I mean, I would love to spend money on all these things, truly I would. As the liaison to the library, however, I have to tell you that I've had a long-standing concern, as many people in the city have, about library, and we've got plans to upgrade our library, and it seems to me that this is a golden opportunity to put our money where our mouths are and make it more of a priority in the budget. So I would say that for me, that would be one of the priorities, maybe not the top, but one of the priorities that I'd like to see discussed.
I'll just make a comment also. You know, we do have the policy of reserving 25% of operating expenditures, and at the same time, I'm very conservative. I don't think we should just go out and spend everything. There is a reason we have reserves. Luckily, during the pandemic, we had the reserves there just in case, and we're not sure what'll come up. You know, the policy minimum is at 25%, but at the same time, I don't think we should be like, oh yeah, here's all this, let's spend the remaining amount. But with that being said, I think investment in capital improvements can be extremely important. I am in agreement, should not just be looking at a five-year plan. Can we look out a little bit more? Pension costs, to continue prepaying, I think is extremely important for our financial health. To continue doing that, we're in a good place with 85% funded, and I think, you know, we can still continue to do that. That will continue to be an annual payment that we have if we don't continue to pay down or prepay on that, because our unfunded liability is at a good place, but we need to continue monitoring it and funding it and continue to ensure that we are not going to be in the same position as some of our fellow cities in the state. You know, and I'm open to some of these others. I like the idea of Wi-Fi Kirsting. I like the idea of Wi-Fi over at Sierra Vista Park. I didn't realize we didn't have that. Well, I think I knew that, but how important it is when we have so many people there over the weekends. But for me, I don't want to just not have the 25%, or I'd like to be conservative and have a little bit more of the 25% that's there, considering what we had just went through in 2020. Capital improvement plan, looking a little bit further out. I agree with the deferred maintenance, library improvements also, but I think there still needs to be, again, more direction given to staff as to what we need back and what those deferred maintenance plan would really look like. I think the costs are going to be way beyond what we have in our $8 million, but again, at least we'll have a better idea, so that we have to continue, you know, addressing issues like our water pipes and our water infrastructures we had in the last 5 years.
Madam Mayor.
Councilman Croops.
On that point, I mean, one thing that, you know, categorically isn't specifically included in this list is the water, and I'm concerned because, you know, what I'm hearing is, based on, you know, the bid that we approved tonight, that the replacement costs of the various segments that we've identified as needing replacement, and then of course there's going to be another, you know, set of segments that need to be replaced after those are, that the bids are coming in much higher than the infrastructure fee that we charge as part of the utility bill. And so I feel like there's almost like going to need to be a recurring, you know, budget item or earmark of any reserves to cover that delta, because we do need to continue on the plan that we've set, and then it's not like that's going to be the end. And I'm worried that there's now a gap between kind of the funding source that we've implemented and what the actual cost of replacement is going to be.
Madam Mayor. It sounded like you wanted to have kind of a larger priority list, kind of a needs-based priority list, if I understood you correctly, and I really like that idea. We're seeing stuff, I feel a little bit like, you know, I'm just peeking under the covers of things, and I'm hearing other things mentioned here, and having a broader picture of this would be really helpful, so that we can look at, you know, the things that I mean, the library is one that just jumps out, you know, like a red light, that, you know, it needs some investment in it, and so I kind of lean towards those things that we have ignored for a long period of time. And I hate to say it even over the Wi-Fi. I mean, I think the Wi-Fi would be really helpful at either Kirsten Court and or Sierra Vista Park. But if we have you'd mentioned, Mayor Pro Tem, the roof at the library. If we've got a leaky roof at a library, that's a bigger issue than the Wi-Fi. And so getting that bigger picture and somehow going through some level of prioritization, I think would be helpful to me to really feel comfortable with the direction giving staff, is having them help us chunk it into, here are the things that are the bigger issues versus the ones that, you know, as the Mayor Pro Tem said, they'll get us reelected, or they'll get me reelected, since you're not running again.
Can I just add to what the mayor said? When we were on council, we came on council, the threshold was at what, 50%? It wasn't 25. It was lowered when our last city manager came in, and he persuaded us, and he had the facts that the best practices, we were told, is about 25%. And I remember we were all uncomfortable dropping it down to 25%, but that was one of the ways we were able to dredge up the funds to prepay on our pension obligations. So I'm looking back at it, and I take your point very seriously. I would like to save, there's $8 million on top of the 25%. It seems to me we ought to have a little more padding there than the 25%, just to piggyback on what you said.
Thank you. I just have a quick question, though. I thought we had already identified some dollars for library.
Yeah.
Did we not have a set aside, an allocation for that already? And where are we with that? Maybe it's my second part of the question.
We have 500,000 budgeted in 21-22. This is in addition.
In addition to. So we still have the 500,000. We have an earmark there, but we have not used that yet.
I believe we're in the process of using. Right.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, and I'm in agreement with Mayor Pro Tem, and actually the rest of the council on those issues regarding having a long-term capital improvement plan. So when we're long gone, dead and buried, that the city has resources to carry on. We provide a legacy. And also thinking about your comments regarding the reserves, I think we should think long and hard about that. We're grateful that we are running surpluses, and I think a lot of it's based on the zero-based budgeting process that's going on, but then some things get kind of left out of that budgeting process, such as some kind of maintenance. So yeah, I agree that we should probably take our time deciding how we spend excess reserves, or if that is the way we should go. But I do believe that the library is priority. So that's what I want to consider. And also, this is a small point, but I'm looking at Goldberg Park here. I recall when I was on the Sierra Madre Community Foundation and the chair and the treasurer, there was a pot of money there. It wasn't a big pot, but I don't know if you're familiar with the foundation, if they have any money left. Maybe that money's gone since I've been there. So I know there was funds specific for Goldberg Park that was being held by the Community Foundation. So if you could look to that, and that could offset some of the costs as well.
Okay, so it sounds like what I'm hearing, though, I mean, we do want to make sure that we're addressing some safety issues. That's why I was asking about the status of the library and where we are with that. If there's anything else that we need to take immediate action on, this is an opportune time to do it. And then also in the capital improvement plan, are there a few items that we're saying, what, we just don't want to defer on this much longer, and at the same time looking at a longer term plan so that we have a better idea as to how we can budget within the next few years, and to obviously reduce the amount of deferred maintenance that we have.
Mayor, and none of these items were budgeted this year. I think what staff would like to do is prepare that 5-year capital improvement plan to develop a way to plan to spend that revenue in future years.
And in my opinion, I don't know where my colleagues are, it's not that we want to wait for any library improvements. I think it's just a matter of understanding what is needed right now and what we can do, and also how that ties in with the capital improvement plan.
We've committed $500,000 to library improvements, and I'd like to invite Director Semino up to maybe give the council an update on what those projects are for this year.
A very short presentation, Director Semino. We have one item left still.
Thanks, City Manager Reynoso. The library this year, Christine and I and Sophia, we spend a lot of time figuring what we can do. And Gabe, he said 500,000. Let's get something done for them because that building's falling apart. So today we're painting that building. We're doing some infrastructure improvements with the access doors. The basement windows we're sealing up so the basement can become a archive room. And then the rest of the money, that's the project that's going on today. Should be done in the next week or so. We're going to get a refresh paint on the building, the windows, the trim, and all that. The next part of it is going to be adding a second building in the parking lot for the Friends book sale. It's for their storage of their books, for their sale and all that. So what we need to do is hire a engineer or architect engineer to come in and draw up plans, go to bid. Not sure if we'll be able to get that done by the end of this fiscal year, but that's what we're working on now is the scope of work for architect engineer for that project.
Director Semino, and that, the building for the Friends, that is part of the 500,000 that's been budgeted for the fiscal year?
The building itself is part of that. Grading some of the parking lot is part of that. There's also another access issue, ADA access issue for the east side emergency exit that we need to engineer and design this year also.
And that's also part of the 500,000, the ADA compliance?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and another project that's in design right now is the front parking. We're going to change the parking to be angle parking in front of the building there. So right now I do have engineers making that design right now.
Okay, thank you. And so if we can find out if there are any other safety issues that need to be addressed, you know, the ADA piece obviously is important. The roofing, we were looking at AC. I don't know if all of those have been addressed, but if we can get feedback on that too.
Can I add something? It mentioned in the report is the discussion of a possible expansion to the actual building. We don't have any idea how much that might cost. There was a square footage mentioned. So evidently somebody's been talking about it or brainstorming it. But remember, we discontinued our plans for a brand new library, largely because of COVID. We were just about there. And I think it would be wonderful if we could make a down payment on some kind of an expansion in addition to some of these upgrades we're talking about.
So maybe part of that would be also getting, checking in with trustees in your next meeting.
Right, yeah.
Just a follow-up question. I mean, my understanding was that the trustees put in place kind of some phases of the various things, right? I mean, the first phase, I think, is what Director Semino was just talking about, and then the expansion, I think, was maybe phase 3 or 4, down sort of a little bit down the road after some of the other things that happened in between.
It could be, but
Okay.
it's never too soon to talk about financing it.
It might be worth refreshing the council on that. It's you know, it's been some time since we've talked about their plan, and especially now that some of it's being implemented, it might be a good idea to have them come and refresh us on that as part of this.
Yeah, where phase 2 is, if phase 2 has started.
Yeah, before I was on the council.
Where did you hear that?
I recall watching a meeting and hearing Councilmember Harabedian at the time saying, you know, one thing we want to avoid, and I agree with it, is to spend money on part of the library that's then going to be demolished to be part of the expansion, because that doesn't make sense either. Although I think painting the eaves, which might get demolished, is paramount, because it's you know, it's a relatively low cost, and it's something that, you know, it's a little bit of, it's our pride of the pride of the library, right? It's very important.
Okay. So, Madam Finance Director, Dorella Leone, do you have enough direction? That was a lot.
Yes, we will consider that input for the budget process.
Great. Okay, thank you so much. Okay, unless there's anything else on that item, I'll move to the next agenda item and the last one, which is consideration of resolution number 21-66. City Attorney Garagosian, I believe you'll be reporting on this one.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. We have a presentation. Can we get do we have the presentation up? Oh, no. We have a printed copy out here for on the dais, so maybe we can just refer to that. Okay. All right, no problem. So if you look at the packet in front of you, Council, hopefully everyone received it. This matter is before you today because the California Attorney General recently announced the national opioid settlement has taken place, which the California Attorney General has been negotiating on. And also we received a letter from Los Angeles County Council that was directed to every city attorney in Los Angeles County, asking every city council to consider this item. So that's why this is before you today. So if you look at the next slide, it shows what this opioid epidemic has done to communities and what the havoc it's caused in many states. You can see that the chart there in about 2015, the overdose deaths as a result of synthetic opioids and especially fentanyl have just been ballooning. And communities in the Midwest have been especially hard hit. I asked the fire chief, and in Sierra Madre we've had one opioid death in the past 2 years. So you go to the next slide. The national opioid settlement is actually two different lawsuits. They both collectively involve 3,500 plaintiffs in over 3,000 cases filed across the country. The first lawsuit involves the three largest pharmaceutical distributors of the opioids, so McKesson, Cardinal Health, and AmerisourceBergen, which are the first three up there. And the second lawsuit involves the opioid manufacturer Janssen, which is a wholly owned subsidiary of Johnson & Johnson. So this multi-district litigation was consolidated in the state of Ohio because they had the most filings because it was the hardest hit state. And a number of attorney generals participated in this. They negotiated the settlement. The settlement is for $26 billion. The opioid distributors, so the first three, are going to pay $21 billion over 18 years. And Janssen is going to pay $5 billion over 7 years. California, for its role, is slated to receive something like $2 billion. And that $2 billion is going to be, the state's going to take a portion, and the remainder is going to be apportioned among the subdivisions of the state, so the counties, special districts, and cities. Cities with a population of over 10,000 are eligible to receive funds. So Sierra Madre just made the cut at 11,000. Sierra Madre's abatement percentage is actually listed in the settlement agreement. We are slated, if we accept this agreement, we are slated to receive 0.006% of 70% of $2 billion. I did the math. If my math is correct, it's something like $50,000 to $100,000 that we can expect to receive. Those funds can be used for a number of different purposes, all of which are provided for in the settlement agreement, including opioid remediation, so drugs to reverse opioid overdoses. I imagine those drugs would probably go to the fire department, to our paramedics. Medication-assisted treatments, prevention programs. Prevention programs, I assume, might be handled by community services, diversion programs, and intervention programs as well. The settlement covers all states, counties, and cities, even those that are not part of the litigation. So what that means is even if we haven't formally participated in the litigation, we can still benefit from it. We didn't have to sue the opioid distributors or manufacturers to participate in the settlement agreement. If the city chooses not to participate, we preserve our right to pursue litigation against these opioid manufacturers and distributors on our own. If we choose to participate, then we can take advantage of the funds available to us. The funds are expected to be distributed in 2022, and the city can choose to administer the funds itself or have the county administer the funds on its behalf. And today we're asking the city council to authorize either the city manager and the city attorney to execute a participation agreement opting into the national opioid settlement. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, City Attorney. What was that amount again you calculated?
I calculated between 50 and 100,000.
Oh, I thought it said 5,200. I'm like, we're doing all this for 5,200.
Oh,
Got
no.
it.
50 to 100,000.
50 to 100,000. Got it. Thank you. Okay, do we have any questions for City Attorney?
Oh, so many questions.
Oh.
So, this was just these particular defendants. I mean, what about like the most, infamous, the Purdue settlement? That's obviously separate and apart, and that's not being distributed in the same way?
Completely separate. Right, and it's not part of this settlement agreement.
And that's not being shared in the same way across the country, and those were all specific to a particular group of plaintiffs, that settlement, or that was a settlement with the federal government?
I don't know who the parties were to that settlement agreement, but to my knowledge, cities are not participating in that settlement agreement.
And my other question is, we could authorize to opt in and then still decide what to do with the money in terms of administering programs ourselves, or ceding the money to the county?
Correct.
And then the last thing is it either or, black and white, like we either keep the funds and do something with all of them, or we give it all to the county, or can it be a little bit of both? Like, can we use a portion of the funds? For example, the fire department probably does have the anti-drug, and we could use a portion of it to recover our costs, but then to the extent that we didn't necessarily want to administer an intervention program here in Sierra Madre, seeing maybe there isn't the kind of need that there would be in the county, we could cede a portion of the money to them?
I don't think the county would be opposed to receiving funds.
But it's not an all or nothing. And
I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't think so.
All right. Thank you.
Who else has questions?
Madam Mayor?
Councilmember Garcia.
You stated the settlement agreement was over a series of years. It's not a lump sum. So the calculation that you did, was that what we're going to get over time, or is that going to be for us allocated as a lump sum?
If I said the settlement agreement was over a number of years, I mean it was being negotiated over a number of years, and they finally reached the settlement agreement. The amounts that we're going to receive should be in a lump sum.
Okay, I thought I heard you say that the allocation of the 76 billion or whatever it is was going to be allocated over over time.
Well, I may have misspoken.
Oh, okay.
As I understand it, it's a lump sum that's going to be distributed in 2022.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor?
Councilmember Parkhurst.
So on my way here tonight, I happened to hear a story on the radio about an Oklahoma Supreme Court case that got voted, that violated the public nuisance clause related to opioid settlements. How does that impact this settlement, or does it impact it at all?
It doesn't. There are actually multiple opioid-related cases happening all across the country right now. One was just settled. One was just the decision was made for the opioid companies in Orange County. So completely different cases. This settlement is in place, and all they're waiting for at this point are for cities to sign on. If a sufficient number of governments don't sign on, the settlement agreement falls apart, and litigation is going to ensue again.
Can these funds be used for training as well? Let's say for PD or FD to train how to handle these types of situations if they don't already have that training?
I did not see training on the list of approved uses of the funds.
I mean, I think I know the answer to this question, but it's nice to get it on record. I assume that what we're giving up by opting in, this right to sue ourselves, you would not place a high value on our right to sue for minimal damage in our particular city.
Correct. And no city, to my knowledge, has gone on its own and sued. They've all been represented by a single, there'll be a law firm that represents a consortium of cities. And what's happened in this litigation is the consortiums all came together in one court and settled the suit because it's so complex to have 3,500 litigants across the state. So, correct. I don't think it'd be to the city's interest. I don't think we have enough opioid deaths, obviously, in the city to warrant a lawsuit. Okay,
any other questions before we open it up for public comment? anyone would like to comment on this item, please come to the podium. James is ready. Okay, seeing none, we'll bring it back for further discussion.
I see no downside to this.
No, and I also don't want the county to administer. I would much rather see us administer those dollars. I mean, it was a strange item to come up on the agenda, and this is new news to me. This is not something I was aware of. But if there's an opportunity for the city to opt in, work's already been done, dollars coming through. I mean, obviously, it's gonna be a matter of identifying what kind of programs, diversion programs and intervention programs, but I'm sure we'll get some resources for that type of information. But I would much rather opt in and see us administer it than it going elsewhere.
Ditto.
Yes.
Same here.
Okay, do I have a motion to approve resolution number 21-66 for the participation in the National Opioid Settlement?
I move to approve.
Do I have a second? Okay, I think it went Parkhurst, I'm not sure. We'll go second there. Further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Seeing none opposed, the motion carries unanimously. And with that, that's our last item. Do we have any future action items or agenda items that you'd like to have for future meetings?
I would like to get the library to come and give us a presentation on the status of the building.
Great. So we have library, we also have the ARPA dollars and seeing about the nonprofit organizations. Anything else? Okay, seeing none, we will adjourn the meeting at 9:17. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.